燃え上がれガンダム。Hello and welcome to Weekly Suit Gundam, the special bonus podcast brought to you by the folks at the Weekly Stuff Podcast. I'm Sean Chapman.
And I'm Jonathan Lack.
And we are here once again to dive into the wacky and wonderful world of Mobile Suit Gundam, ending our little brief side tour through the OVA. I say brief, it's been a long time on the podcast, but we are watching our third and have discussed, or we're discussing our third of the OVA series from the 80s and 90s with Mobile Suit Gundam, the 08th MS Team.
Absolutely. This is the end of the OVA-a-thon.
Yes.
We will have some OVAs in the 2000s, like the theatrical ones. We already did Unicorn, but This is the end of the, and we also did Endless Waltz back on the Gundam Wing episode.
So we did, so those were the four of the classical period of OVAs of the 90s, where OVAs were extremely popular.
Yes. And this is one of the best, one of the most fun. 08th MS Team I've referred to a couple of times on this show as goody, we get to have our dessert now, and that is what it feels like. And it feels like that in a couple of ways for me, because 8th MS Team is just one of the most purely entertaining Gundam series. I also think it is a very surface level Gundam. I don't think it is particularly deep. It is not War in the Pocket. It is not Turn A Gundam. You will not come away from it with a different viewpoint on the world and the nature of war and time and space and all these things. It is very surfacey, but I don't really mean that as a criticism. I think when the surface is this rich and this fun and this well executed pretty consistently, that's just great. And it is just one of the most purely entertaining. And if you are a Gundam fan who is just into the cool mechs and the fights and the world building, this has all of that in spades. And it is one of the Gundams, I would say, if you have even a passing interest in the franchise, you would probably love.
Absolutely. It is a thing where one of the things I love about 08th MS Team is the way that it is one of the few Gundams that captures a very specific feeling from that mid-period of the original show. Because it has a similar thing of, like you're saying, where it is not interested in the big picture ideological stuff. It is not about this young boy changing his whole philosophy on what the world is and everything like that. It's a very sort of grounded military style story. It's like this one, very clearly, it's like the Vietnam Gundam show. But it has that thing that the original Gundam had in that period, where it just has this very, we're focused on this small picture perspective on these much bigger events, and we tell that story really well with fantastic pacing, with great character work, with great action. And it doesn't certainly have the deepest thematic elements of the Gundam franchise has to offer, but not all Gundam needs to be that or do that. Because what it does offer is basically an entire season of episodes of Gundam that feel like the Time Be Still episode where from the original Gundam, where the Zeon soldiers put the bombs on the Gundam. It feels like this team watched that episode and were like, what if we just made a show that was this? And that's what 08th MS Team and it fucking rules.
Yes. Yeah, and when I say 8th MS Team is surfacey, what I mean is that it also knows what register it's working in.
Yeah.
There is a turn the show takes, and we can even talk, because it's actually when the director shift happens.
Yes.
That the show knows that it is going to be kind of a soap opera, and it knows it is going to be big, loud emotions, and the major themes of the show are going to be things the characters will tell you.
Yeah.
But it's good at that. It's actually really interesting to put next to Stardust Memory, which we talked about last time, which I don't think knows what register it's working in. Because it is often very soapy, but feels like it's trying to be more like OG Gundam or something.
Or it's like it feels like it's trying to be like Zeta Gundam.
Yeah.
It does not know how to be like Zeta Gundam.
And it doesn't really know how to work in that register. I think 8th MS Team is extremely confident at what register it's in. And I don't think every single aspect of it is perfect. We'll talk about... I'm not a fan of the finale of this show. But
we will talk about what is the finale of the show.
Yes.
I think what you're saying is the finale is not the finale.
No. But the main 11-episode run is so confident. I also love that it is very episodic. In the way that when you say it's like that Time Be Still, it's also that like each individual episode is just a good piece of military fiction.
Yeah.
And if you like that kind of thing, like the kinds of episodes that would not be in the movie adaptation, let's say, this is like an OVA full of those, and then builds to a 2-part finale that is the peak of all Gundam action in my mind.
Oh yeah, no, it has the best action sequence in any Gundam, which is basically the entirety of episode 10.
Yeah. It's also got a fucking Kohei Tanaka score. I mean, what is not to love?
It's just a fucking killer Gundam show. Yeah, and it's one I know we both have been very excited to get to.
It's one of the most rewatchable. It's like, like War in the Pocket is not one I could just turn on any random weekend. I could do that with 8th MS Team.
Yes, absolutely, because it just kicks so much ass.
And it's got a really interesting production history. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, so in terms of production, Mobile Suit Gundam 08th MS Team is an OVA series of 11 episodes and a special bonus episode, effectively, which is the 12th episode, and a compilation movie, Miller's Story. And then there is also a short little special they did in 2013 that's 9 minutes long called Battle in 3 Dimensions, which is just an action scene basically with those characters. It's not, we're not going to address that because it's not substantial. But it's a very popular sort of small segment of the history of Gundam. And it ran from 1996 to 1998, with the 12th episode then being in July 25th, 1999.
The 11 is also 99.
Is it? I thought...
There is so episode 10 is July 98, and episode 11 is April 99. There was a huge delay between those two.
Oh, yes. No, you were right. Yes.
Yeah. If you were... I weep for the people in Japan watching this as it came out, because there were some brutal delays.
Yes. And so the reason why there are brutal delays is that the original director, Takayuki Kanda, tragically passed away. He was killed in a car accident in 1996. So he, the original director, was a Sunrise guy. He had done this series and a bunch of OVAs based on the series called Ginga Hyoryu Vfam, which basically means Wandering Dragon of the Galaxy, Vfam, which is his name. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce the Vfam in English. I'm just going to call him Vfam. And so he made that show. It was very popular. It got a spin-off. It got some OVAs. And he was the creator and director for that series, along with a couple of other mecha shows that he did. He worked on Raiding the Brave, which is a pretty popular super robot show that Sunrise had. And so then they gave him this with an episode order of 12 episodes to do an OVA series. And so they worked on it with his team. The rest of the people are sort of standby Sunrise people that have been a bunch of stuff, like Kunihiro Mori, who has done writing and storyboarding on a bunch of Gundam stuff at this point. Akira Nishimori, a similar situation. So there's a bunch of Gundam people making the show. And then they make the first 6 episodes, and after the production of the 6th episode, which all the episodes being individually released on VHS or Laserdisc, other than the first 2, which were released as a pair. So after they released the 6th episode and were in pre-production on the 7th episode and getting that ready, Takayuki Kanda is killed in a car accident. And so then there's sort of a scramble to figure out what to do. That causes massive delays in the production. They get a new director, Umanosuke Ida, who has not done a huge amount of stuff, but has done a little bit here and there. And so he's kind of brought in to see the show to its conclusion. The rest of the staff is basically the same. And that's where you get these long delays. So episode 6, released in December 18th, 1996. Reunion, episode 7, releases in October 1997. So you're getting basically a year-long delay there. The production picks up a little bit, then you get your huge delay between episodes 10 and 11.
I mean, so it's interesting, during the first director,
yeah,
all 6 of those first 6 came out pretty regularly in 1996. So 1996 is half the series.
Yes.
And then 97 is 2 episodes, 98 is 2 episodes, and 99 is 2 episodes. So those last 6, like, I have to assume that with his death, like, I know we don't have huge behind-the-scenes details, but it must have just been, like, all the resources they were putting to it maybe had to go do other things, or like...
part of it was there was not... Because obviously he didn't expect to be killed in a car accident, so there were not hugely detailed drafts or whatever of the subsequent story, because he was the director, so he oversaw the big picture perspective on where everything was going, and he had notes and memos, but he did not have a, like, this is beat by beat where we are going. And I suspect pretty strongly that is the reason why it is 11 episodes really and not 12 episodes really.
Right.
Is due to that scenario, because the original episode run was they had, like, signed contracts and advertised it, like the original TV spots all advertised it as being a 12 episode run, all this kind of stuff. When the new director is putting stuff together and trying to figure out what to do, they ultimately end up with 11 episodes. So then, from what I understand, and effectively what happened was, in order to fulfill the 12 episode count, they made Last Resort, which is the 12th episode, which is referred to as a Tokubetsu Hin, which is like special episode, special part. And that episode, and this is an interesting thing I discovered upon diving into some of the stuff on the Japanese internet. From the Japanese perspective, that is not part of OVA-a-thon MS Team.
Interesting.
So if you look up OVA-a-thon MS Team on Japanese Wikipedia, it is 11 episodes, and then below that says OVA Special Part Last Resort, and then under that says Miller's Report, the movie.
Yeah.
And even if you try to stream it on Amazon.com, Last Resort is a separate thing. So it is, you go into OVA-a-thon MS Team, it is 11 episodes. There's a separate tile that is where Last Resort is, and there's a separate tile where Miller's Report is. And it is
that's how it should be.
Yeah, that's how it should be. That episode, for whatever reason, in the West, it's just not organized that way. So
even though it did not air, the Cartoon Network airing, which it aired in 2001 on Toonami, and I think they honestly made all the right calls, because they just showed the 11, and for episode 8, they edited in all the extra footage from Miller's Report, which we'll probably talk about later, is honestly really good stuff that people should see. But, yeah, and then they did not show Last Resort, but it's always been on our DVDs and Blu-rays here.
Yeah, so for people, if you watched it and didn't, like, know, I mean, and we'll talk about it when we get there, about how obvious it is that it is not supposed to be part of the original run, but, like, I had no idea that it legitimately is not supposed to be a part of and considered to be part of, like, the story of OVA-a-thon MS Team. It is a special extra episode, effectively, that, as far as I can tell, they basically had to make in order to fulfill the original order of it being a 12-episode series. And,
I think you can... Like, nothing about the style, animation-wise or music-wise or anything, changes between episodes 6 and 7. I do think there's a subtle shift in how the second director sees the story, where he leans heavier on the soap opera sort of aspect of it, the Romeo and Juliet of it all, and kind of goes for those maybe more heightened emotions in ways that are there in the first 6. Yeah. But I think he, like, it's something clearly, like, that guy and that team saw and kind of drew out in a way that I'm not sure would have been as strong in the initial plan for the series, because it does feel like a bit of a hard turn. Yeah, and what I am guessing is I would not be surprised if the original idea would be to have a lot of the material that's in episode 7 to have actually been 2 episodes of Shiro and Aina together. Yeah. Because for me, episode 7 is, like, rough, because it is clearly, like, a hard transition that is, like, kind of messy in a lot of places into what you're saying of the soap opera-y thing. And then I think after that, they get back to what feels more like, this feels like OVA-a-thon MS Team moving towards a conclusion, which is why it feels more heightened there. But yes, it definitely, you can tell, you can feel it, I think, very clearly in episode 7, and then you can definitely kind of feel a general shift in the overall tone. But a lot of the material is still, like, the heart of the show feels like it is still there. No, absolutely. Like, it's not one where, like, I don't think you would notice it if you didn't know the production history. You would not know that there were these massive delays. You would not know that you're watching episodes that came out a year apart. But when you then go and read about it, you go, okay, that kind of tracks with what I saw. And it's not the kind of thing where, like, Gundam Wing, you can just tell the scripts just went out the window and they had no idea what they were doing. That's not this show. Yes. But, like, there is a little shift, and as you would naturally have, and it's tragic that the first director passed away that way. but man, they did it justice down the home stretch.
Yeah, and to just give people a little bit of perspective of where we are in terms of the rest of the Gundam thing, because this airs for such a long time. So the beginning of 08th MS Team overlaps with the ending of Gundam Wing. The entirety of Afterwar Gundam X and Endless Waltz comes out over the course of the 08th MS Team's release, and then the very end of 08th MS Team overlaps with the very beginning of Turn A Gundam.
Yeah, it's a long. I mean, it's by far the longest time it took for any Gundam show to come out.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. So it is like, you know, it's basically just stretches over the entire second half of the 90s in terms of what Gundam is, and brings us effectively, for the purposes of the show, up to where we left off with Turn A Gundam and that kind of period in the show's history.
And honestly, I think it's kind of remarkable that the animation style is so consistent over these 12 episodes, because it has a very mid-90s feel, like a high-budget mid-90s, and it maintains that even when you get to the end where you know things would be shifting, and yeah. So it's so good. Yeah,
it's a fantastic show with and unfortunately tragic elements of its production history, but ultimately comes out as a fantastic show that to me epitomizes and is the best version of the boots on the ground military style Gundam fiction that gets away from the new type stuff and all of that. Is just very focused on this limited perspective of a soldier living in this war and fighting in this war. I think this is the best that Gundam ever gets at telling that story.
Yeah, I might... would Thunderbolt apply to that? Because Thunderbolt does have a little new typey stuff.
No, I would say that it's... Because it's also... We are not... Shiro Amada is a good pilot. He's not an ace pilot.
That's a good point.
There's a big difference between him and the kinds of pilots you see in Thunderbolt.
And Thunderbolt literally isn't boots on the ground because it's 100% space. Yes. So, yes.
Yeah, so that's part of what I mean of and that's why it has this time be still element to it. Is it's these are normal soldiers. Shiro is a very skilled pilot for a normal person.
Yes.
But he is far away from the level of skill you get from a Norris in the show, or even the pilots in Stardust Memory, who are not as good as an Amuro, but Ko is clearly several steps above the average pilot in terms of visibility.
Yeah, I mean, he's a test pilot. Yeah. Shiro is kind of a low-level commander in this area of the war that, you get a sense is not a huge priority for, command.
It's it's only sort of important because it's vaguely close to Jaburo. It's not actually close to Jaburo, but it's on the same continent as Jaburo, so it's if Zeon's doing stuff down here, we want to make sure they're not getting too close to Jaburo, so we'll have you guys be over here.
Well, literally, one of the things 8th MS Team does really well is it signposts where we are in the timeline.
Yeah.
And so you know that, the bigger things are happening. Odessa Day takes place over the first half of 8th MS Team.
Yeah.
They're getting ready for the big final battles in space as this series is wrapping up. You know, they're part of it is they don't want the Absolus to get out there at the end because they're going to go take on
Solomon.
Solomon. So there's stuff like that is just really cool. But I agree about the boots on the ground thing. I mean, it is such a good ground level perspective with these pilots who are very much not aces. It's what is it just day to day life in the Federation military. And it's why episode 10 when we get there is so fucking good.
Yeah.
It's like Darth Vader in Rebels or something, Star Wars or Rogue One or something. What is when a normal person goes up against someone like this? What is that like? And it's fucking crazy.
It's fucking scary.
Shit. Yeah. So yes. So where do we want to start with this series, breaking it down?
Let's start with the beginning, because I want to talk about the first episode, which has one of my favorite action sequences in all of Gundam, which gives credit to the most underrated of all the mobile suits, which is the respectable ball from the Earth Federation.
War for Two is one of the best Gundam premieres.
Yeah,
it is a very
so good.
It's a very unconventional Gundam premiere, because in many ways, Episode 2 it's almost like a prologue, and then Episode 2 is you actually get to the jungle, you meet the full team, all of that stuff. But Episode 1 is really just kind of putting Shiro in place and meeting Aina. But it does it with such incredible skill and style, and it is such a powerful introduction to these characters. And yes, there is no better way to make me think your main character is cool than to have him go out against overwhelming odds in a fucking ball and win.
Yes, and it's just the whole sequence of events of him seeing, there is a pilot out there that is stranded, and he's like, we got to go save him. We have to do something. The pilot of their like transport ship's like, well, we don't have any fucking mobile suits. It's like, yeah, well, I saw that ball in the docking bay like when I came on board. So it's like, let's use that. It's like, okay. The way like the mechanics of using this thing that is clearly this outdated piece of shit that is not designed for modern war in this period, and it's not a mobile suit. It should not be able to go up against a Zaku, and like the only tactic he can do is to basically like tackle it, use the ball to like bear hug the fucking Zaku, and use like the rope on it to sort of hold it down long enough for Sanders, as who we will come to know as one of the main characters, as he escapes back to their dropship, and just the sense of desperation and the perspective of it as being someone who's a Gundam fan. And you have always seen in the background in any of this One Year War stuff, these shitty little Federation mobile suits, these balls with a giant fucking gun cannon on top. And they are always useless, and they're so dumb looking, and they just seem so shitty.
They're usually like the cannon fodder where in a battle you see a bunch of them blow up.
Exactly, yeah. And they're like, and there's a great design in how they feel like this is why mobile suits are as effective as they are, is because this is what they were using before. And there's a logic to the ball's design in terms of space combat that also just looks so weak and flimsy. So bring that out and like using that properly in an action sequence. It is both just like a great characterization for Shiro as this like reckless but skilled pilot who is going to be our main character. But then it is also just incredible fan service as a Gundam fan to see that thing actually be used in an action sequence.
And it also sets the stage for all the action sequences in 8th MS Team, which is that they are really detail-oriented.
Yeah.
They are very thoughtful about the mechanics of these things. If you are a like Gundam nerd who likes, you know, seeing how the different pieces of it are going to be used and like the strategy of battles and those sorts of things that like I think Tomino Gundam does well a lot.
Yeah.
You're just right away you're gonna feel at home because it's ridiculous, and yet the way Shiro kind of wins the day is utterly plausible. In how you actually see, like, okay, so he uses the cable on the ball and he wraps around, and then both the ball and the Zeon suit are kind of breaking apart as they're being like hugged together. He's using like gravity and like rotation. It is such a good action sequence.
Yeah, and ending with the destruction of both our experimental Zaku that Aina pilots and the most powerful, the best, the greatest of all the balls. I have the full name of it. It's the RB-79K Ball Type K.
Yes.
Good, mad respect to the ball.
Yeah. Have you read Crossbone? I know you've read Crossbone Gundam. Have you read the Skull Heart follow-up?
No, I have not gotten to that yet.
Okay, there is a chapter in that where like the old guy in Crossbone Gundam is talking about how when he was a young lad he did something like this in a ball. And I think that would have published before 8th MS Team. This is better, though. This is a better ball action sequence. Because I think the one in Skullheart is called, like, An Idiot Triumphs in a Ball or something. So this is not the only time Gundam has done it. I do think this is the best time Gundam has done it.
This is the 2 times the ball has been used in the history of Gundam as an effective weapon.
And yet, to me, that's not even the main reason why this is such a great premiere. It's because the second half of the episode is this just phenomenal narrative hook of Shiro and Aina having to work together to survive. And if Shiro going out in a ball wasn't enough to kind of tell you who this guy is, he will work with his enemy, and he has this kind of inherent empathy for her that becomes love, obviously. But you get the sense he would do this for anyone in this way. And it is just this really compelling then kind of procedural sequence of them figuring out how the hell do we get off of here and live. And by the end of it, man, it has set up like the main narrative thread of the series with the 2 leads, the romantic leads, but it has also given you such a unique and compelling lead in Shiro. It has given you such a very different perspective on the war. It is like, if you are not hooked by the end of this episode, I don't know what to tell you. It is such a good premiere. Yeah,
and it sets up for Shiro is the dynamic for that character that I really like. That speaks really well to the sort of Vietnam story influences here, or also I'm currently doing All Quiet on the Western Front with my 10 Honors kids, which I also did last year, which I think I talked about at some point on there, because I've talked about Gundam with my class in relation to it, because they're obviously All Quiet being one of the most influential war stories ever written is influential to Gundam in lots of places. But this is one of this very much the individual soldiers are not necessarily like, ideological zealots for whatever their side is, right? There are lots of reasons why people like Shiro and the rest of the OVA-a-thon team are in the military, that don't necessarily have to do with their like driving need to squash the Zeon bid for independence for the colonies or whatever, right? They're not necessarily politically motivated all the time. And so this sense of mutual respect he has, and this feeling of, for Shiro as an individual, there is no merit really in killing other like enemy soldiers if they are unarmed, right? He has no need to go out and exterminate every single last Zeon person that could possibly potentially add to their war effort, because that's not the perspective we have on the war. And I think it sets that up so well, and it makes for a really endearing and compelling lead and a dynamic for the show with that perspective, that you have someone who's like doesn't, Shiro himself doesn't seem to like really fully understand why he is fighting in the military. He seems to just kind of ended up here, as lots of young people do, and he's struggling to figure out what that means and what's the right and wrong thing to do. But clearly, like, killing an unarmed person is the wrong thing to do, and working with someone else to try to survive in this like hopeless scenario is the right thing.
And he's also someone who can see the forest for the trees.
Yes.
And know, if I just killed this random woman, I would also die, because we need to do this together.
Yes.
And like, there's not going, the war is not going to turn on whether or not I kill this one person in front of me.
Yeah.
And there is, so much of Gundam is about to kill or not to kill. But there's something that is, and again, it's extremely explicit in this show, because Shiro, his whole thing is the orders he gives his team are come back alive. But there's something about the sanctity of life for this guy that he actually believes in. Like, that is his guiding principle, is that the people important to him shouldn't die for nothing.
Yeah.
And that is something the show really engages with. So let's talk about Shiro for a second, as our lead here, because part of what I think is also so astonishing about War for Two, the premiere, is that it really leans into, he is a wholly unique Gundam protagonist for what we've had so far.
Yeah.
And even, I think, for a lot of later Gundam. In that, we've had, like, in F91 and in Stardust Memory, slightly older Gundam boys, but they're still Gundam boys.
Yeah.
They're still, like, this is their first girlfriend, and they are coming of age, and all that stuff. And Shiro's not. He's like mid-20s. He's a man.
He's 23 years old, according to the official Gundam wiki.
And I always think official Gundam ages are too low.
Yes. 23 years old, like, that's very reasonable. Like, that's relatively old for, like, the position he's in the military.
Right.
Yeah.
But he's been around. You sense that Aina is not the first woman he's ever looked at. That kind of thing. I mean, to put it crass, he's not a virgin. He's not someone who's like literally and like the figuratively of like he is an innocent, you know? He is a dude who has been around the block, who has been in combat situations before. He is not jaded in the way you could be from that. But this is pointedly not a coming of age story. And this is someone who is a little more set in their ideas. That's not to say he doesn't have an arc and things he learns. He very much does. But it is just a wholly different arc than the Amuro archetype. And that is something that makes this series, I think, so unique and memorable.
Yeah. To put it into perspective, though, with Shiro's age, he is 2 years older than Nina, relative in Stardust Memory, which is... The ages in Stardust Memory, in particular, are fucked up.
Yeah, no, they make no sense.
If you think about that, because Nina absolutely feels way older than Shiro to me.
Yeah, I mean, Shiro is probably an enlisted man who, like, went to the academy and like, literally,
he probably graduated out of high school, went to the academy because for whatever reasons, and because he would have been in the military for a while before the 1 year war started.
Yes,
which is different than most of our protagonists, who are people who have no real connection to the military and get kind of jumped into it when some sort of tragedy occurs.
He's sort of like Captain Bright, but as the protagonist of the series.
Yeah,
because he's coming from probably that same kind of profile. And thrown into a very different kind of leadership position here. Like 4 people and not a ship that is the core of the entire strategy of the Federation. But yeah, so...
And he's also, one small detail I like about him as a character is that he is, even though he's fighting for the Earth Federation, he is from space, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of episode 2, is it's the first time he's actually been on Earth. And I do love the Earth Federation's shitty tendency to get pilots that are not trained to fight in whatever gravity situation they're in and sending them there without any training, which has happened both in Stardust Memory and here very explicitly, but also just happens all the time with Gundam. It's like, this is the first time I've ever been in space, and now you're asking me to pilot a mobile suit? This seems bad. This is the first time I've ever been in actual gravity. You're asking me to pilot a mobile suit? Seems like you should have probably given me a week of training or something before you sent me on my first mission, but okay.
He is voiced by Nobuyuki Hiyama.
Yes.
Who, great actor, lots of different things. I like, notably here, he is Link in
Ocarina of Time. Yeah. So he's Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Smash Brothers in Melee. He is Link.
Yeah.
So he is like my Link.
Yes.
Because he is definitely the like.
It's the one in your head.
Yeah. The one I think of, which obviously that's like. He doesn't have voiced lines, but when you think of Link going, like, it's very clearly his voice, because, he has a very distinctive anime yell. Like, I don't even know how you describe his... It's so, like, singular.
No, it is. And
it sounds when he's, like, shouting.
In episode 10, when he has his big moment, I want to live, oh, you need that shout. It's a great performance.
Yes, it's a phenomenal performance.
Yeah.
He's, for me, Hiyama, like, his big... claim to fame is he's Hiei in Yu Yu Hakusho, which if you've seen any Yu Yu Hakusho in Japanese, like, you know how, like, really iconic that performance is. And you know it's iconic because he kind of got typecast as that character after that point, because that's a lot of what his credits are. But yeah, Hiyama's fantastic. And he does a very good job, because I do feel like Shiro is slightly outside of the normal character he plays as, because the normal character he plays is either the, like, an Amuro type that is a little bit, maybe not more Amuro, maybe a little bit more judo side of Gundam protagonist, but that more like really hot-headed kind of character. He plays that a lot, or he plays the Hiei type, kind of like aloof and just like very dismissive and insulting to people and thinks he's like way better than everyone else. And those are the two kinds of characters he usually plays as. And Shiro is just... he's not any of those extremes, right? Which kind of makes him feel fairly unique as an anime protagonist.
And he has all those elements, though, and it's you can tell it's a role that he gets to stretch his legs with, because you go to those different areas. Because he is, like in episode 2, he does some hot-headed shit, but it's not his main defining attribute.
No, like a lot of times he's pretty calm, he's pretty level-headed, he's like fairly normal. And like, I mean, one of his main defining traits to me is that he's a little bit naive for like the position that he's in. But yeah, it's a phenomenal performance. And Hiyama's just, I just love his voice. I love hearing him in anything because it just sounds so fucking good.
So you want to talk about episode 2, Gundam's in the Jungle?
Yes.
And I think here we can also bring in just talking about the rest of the team. And of course, as the title tells us, this is now we're in it. This is the Gundam's in the Jungle.
Yep.
You have to just try to not think about the continuity of there being too many Gundams in this war, but that's everything outside of OG Gundam.
But to be fair, like, I think the way that OVA-a-thon team, like, this is what makes sense to me, is like, we have the Gundam, the original, the experimental RX-78-2 prototype thing that Amuro is piloting, which is the best of them, because it's unique. But that, was more or less finished several weeks ago at this point. They would have already been in some sort of mass production of worse versions of the Gundam that we have here, with the Gundam ground types that are clearly very good, but they don't feel like this is like a phenomenally better machine than a Zaku, right?
No, they can't go fly around all over the place.
Exactly. So it's like clearly not as powerful as Amuro's Gundam. And it's like, this makes way more sense to me, and I think is more in the spirit of Gundam as a franchise, to be like, this is a massive war effort that engulfs the entire Earth and it's the Earth sphere with the space colonies. There should be more than just the one Gundam, and it, for me, fixes a little thing that feels off about the original series.
If you read Gundam The Origin, the manga, this fits with that continuity.
Yes,
where like that one kind of subtly shifts it to like, they have plenty of mobile suits. The Gundam they're trying to make is like their killer weapon, and it's been prototyped for a long time.
Yes, and there would have been these sort of like mass-produced versions of the Gundam that would have just started entering service at this period of the war. For me, that's like, this fits more with like the logic of how Gundam works, better than we have to have the Gundam be the only Gundam that exists because we have to make the toy, and it's supposed to be a show for kids, even though any child who watches this show is going to be traumatized for the rest of their life.
Yes. And those Gundam ground types, Sean, those are good designs.
Yes, I like the, again, keeping with like the Vietnam theme. I have no idea if like this is a specific inspiration or not, but it makes me think of the things they carried, the like classic Vietnam novel, which the title of that novel comes from all the shit the soldiers have to carry all the time, like their personal effects, and then all the shit they need to do with, like, you know, to do their military, whatever they're assigned to do, their missions. And I like that the Gundam ground types have these massive fucking backpacks on the back that have all their, like, gear and shit in it, that they're, like, trudging through the jungle with, is a really great, like, visual indicator to distinguish these Gundams from a standard other Gundam.
Yeah, like, there are no radical new mobile suit designs in 8th MS Team for obvious reasons, but it is a lot of, like things like the ground types, or some of the GMs you see in the series, or My Big Blue Boy that we'll get to later, where it's very clearly this is Kunio Okawara. It is like a really like heart of Gundam style designs, refined, really well animated, and I think those ground type Gundams, like, again, like, they're not like the new Gundam in Char's Counterattack or something where it's like, holy fucking shit, what did they do? But boy, are they pleasing to look at, and they look really good in a fight. And I also think there's just a lot of, in that very, like, Okawara tradition, a lot of thought put into the functionality of the mobile suits in this series, which is also just part of the military on the boot story, or boots on the ground storytelling we're doing. We've both made that mistake. Yes, it's great that you get, and I think those ground types. I love the way they use, like, white and beige in this series, because you get it on a lot of, like, the GMs, like, especially near the end when, like, both Shiro and the woman, what's her name? Karen have lost their Gundams, and so they're in sort of these shittier, like, GM style things, and they're those kind of white beige suits. There's just a lot of good, like, those kind of colors too. Yeah,
because it is like a lot of the color palette for the mobile suits is like washed out more, which makes them blend in better than, like, the big brighter colors you get in a standard Gundam TV show. And yeah, definitely, like, makes them sit into the environment better. It makes the design feels like it fits the tone of the more grounded Vietnamese style military story they're doing.
Let's talk about the Vietnam of it all.
Yes.
Because it's interesting. I mean, they definitely, I think this is an interesting one to compare to a show I'm sure we will talk about at some point, which is Armored Trooper Bottoms.
Yes.
Which I've been watching. I had to go watch other things, including the Gundams we've been talking about. So I was in the middle of the Vietnam section of Bottoms, which is the second arc. What do they call that?
I don't remember off the top of my head what they're, like, fake
Vietnam
because it's, you know, Bottoms is set in, like, outer space in, like, a different galaxy, so it's like the planet of Vietnam, basically, in the same way that Star Wars has, like, I mean, that is what Endor is the planet of Vietnam also in Star Wars. So
but, like, I think something interesting, if you've seen Bottoms, you know that their Vietnam section, I mean, that show is mid-'80s. It is, like, so you would have had a bunch of Hollywood Vietnam films are out by that point. You would have had things like The Deer Hunter that it pulls really strongly from. I mean, literally the second episode in Fake Vietnam in Bottoms has the fucking Russian roulette thing, which was not a thing that happened in Vietnam, but is in the movie The Deer Hunter, so now in, like, the public memory, it's something that happened in Vietnam. And the Bottoms one also really gets the, like, kind of seedy underbelly of, like, these clubs where deals are going down. It's really sweaty, and, like, you feel the kind of, like, the heat and the grime of it all, and it's also a very dark section of the story. And so I think that one is, like, very informed by not just the aesthetics of Vietnam, but, like, a lot of the themes and films that come out of that. I think 8th MS Team, and this isn't a criticism, it's just an observation, is more kind of a surface aesthetic thing there than it is, like, a tonal or thematic thing it goes for, because if it were going in that direction, a lot more people would die, and it would be, I think, quite a darker show, whereas this is a fairly upbeat Gundam show. So I think what it allows the show to do is have these really unique settings where you are in the jungle, it's hard to see your opponent, there's a lot of, like, strategic thinking, like, just movement on the ground is something that comes into play a lot. And you have things like that going on. You get really cool shots, like Gundam's, like, going through the fucking river, which is great. But I think it's interesting when you say the Vietnam thing, and I was surprised by this the first time I watched it. If you just describe the show as Gundam in Vietnam, I think you might be a little surprised by the content of it, especially because the second half of the show doesn't...
the second half of the show gets pretty far away from it. Like, specifically, the finale is completely removed from that element. I think for me, where it comes from is more the attitudes of, like, the attitude of the military is the thing that feels the most directly, like, inspired from Vietnam. That and, like, the tactics and things you get. Because obviously you have, like, the guerrillas that are in the forest, and you have the, like, limited sight line, what's going on, all that kind of stuff. And, like, that's clearly inspired by the sort of things you would see in a Vietnam movie. But for me, it is just more that sense of none of these people really give a shit about what they're doing. They're just in the scenario, and they can't help but continue with the momentum. Like because if they tried to leave, they'd be fucking killed. They would be shot or they'd be put in jail by the side that they're working for. And that is, to me, like the attitude the show has with the military is the Vietnam part of it.
I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah, and obviously Vodhams does not get into that because it's about a guy who is like special.
Yeah, because Kitiko's not on any side. He's on his own side.
Yes.
But
I think they're interesting points of comparison because I think you could probably argue they might not have ever done 8th MS Team if Vodhams was not a
Vodhams, I think, was a clear inspiration. That section of Vodhams. It's like they are fairly different, but having... The first time I'd watched the 8th MS Team, I had not seen Vodhams. So this is the first time I've seen it since I watched Vodhams, and it is pretty clear to me that it is obviously an influence. Like, both here and in other places. Like, we've had... I mean, Stardust Memory was made mostly by people who came from Vodhams more than Gundam. Right. So it's like had a lot of influence.
Vodhams is not like the biggest hit in the world, but for Sunrise, it's a clear touchstone for them, like, as a company. And so I think that's interesting. Its presentation of Vietnam is interesting. And I agree with that whole attitudinal thing, which you get right off the bat here with all the people. And, like, let's talk about the different members of the team. Yeah. Because you've got Michael, or is it Mikhail,
I think is how it's supposed to be. It's like more Russian-y.
Yeah, you have Mikhail, who's the little boy who's actually a man, but he has his girlfriend back home, BB, who he is constantly writing to. And you have Elidor, Elidor is the one I get the sense was like fucking drafted. Because he does not want to be here. He is a musician. He's got his song he's really excited in one episode. It's going to be on the radio, and he has just checked the fuck. He's good at his job, but he has checked the fuck out. Yeah. And then you have like 2 actual soldiers in Karen and Sanders, and I think that team dynamic is really fun.
Yes. They're all great characters. You have like a really strong cast here. In particular, Elidor, who is voiced by Keiji Fujiwara, who unfortunately he passed away earlier this year. But like a phenomenal voice actor who's just been, in a bunch of shit.
His rap sheet is long.
But he's specifically, like, I most directly remember, if you played Final Fantasy VII Remake in Japanese, or if you've watched Advent Children, he's Reno, one of the Turks. It's like a very, like a very iconic performance. He's one of the main characters from Gintama as well. Like great performer, and we will meet him again in Double Gundam. I've just remembered that he's also all through that.
He's Hughes in Full Metal Alchemist. I mean, if there's there will be someone you loved that he voiced. If you look at his rap sheet. Also, I love this. He is the guy who dubbed all of Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man.
Yes, that is also true. Yeah, if you've seen, and I would recommend, because you can find them on YouTube. People have like made clips because it is just very funny to listen to like modern anime voice actors play Avengers, because he plays Iron Man. He does a good job. It's a very different sounding Iron Man, but he does a great job of it. Then you also have Mami Koyama, who plays Karen, who we have seen before because she is also the voice of Cecilia Zabi in the original Mobile Suit Gundam.
Oh yeah, I'm like, this sounds familiar, and I didn't look it up, so that makes sense.
Yeah, and she will continue to, because I think she's also, she's one of the main characters in Seed Destiny as well. So we will see her again. She is also, Jonathan, you would know her best as the voice of Launch in Dragon Ball.
Yes, because and Shohayama, yes. I know the name. From that
and she's also the original voice of Arale from the Dr. Slump stuff. So all over, if you like your Toriyama, Mami Koyama, all over that. But then also she is like our queen before our queen with Cecilia Zabi, who's not quite Haman Karn, but is like the stepping stone that Tomino needed to create to get to the Queen of Space, Haman Karn.
Cecilia walked so Haman Karn could run.
Exactly, yes. That's very much what it feels like.
And then you have Sanders is the great Tesho Genda. And Tesho Genda is an institution. He is like from that generation with like Shigeru Chiba and Daisuke Gori, who are the character actors who are in everything. Yeah. But one thing is Tesho Genda is like, he is the big, deep-voiced villain character in a lot of things. Like right now, he is on One Piece as the current big bad of the Wano arc, whose name is for some reason escaping me, and that's bad. I'm a huge One Piece fan. But anyway, that's the kind of thing he usually does. And here he is the like gentle giant Sanders, and I really love that. It's a little out of like, it's fun to hear Tesho Genda in that kind of register, and I really appreciate that in this show.
And we have also heard him very recently because he was also Kelly in Stardust Memory. Yep. So our having Tesho Genda and Vegeta be lovers is something we will never really be able to have. It's our sad fate that they didn't take Stardust Memory in the right direction. He's also Slugger Law in the original Mobile Suit Gundam, so he's...
Oh, I forgot he was Slugger Law.
As with all these voice actors, I mean, this is one of the things that's fun about, OVA-a-thon MS team. It's something that we'll see as we start like moving on past this to future Gundam shows, is this is a very big turning point of, it's one of the last Gundams before like the modern era of anime where we'll see a lot of this generation of voice actors kind of phase out a little bit. For the new really popular voice actors we'll get in the 2000s.
Kaido, by the way, is the One Piece character I'm saying about Tesho Genda. Before I get any comments on that, I am sorry, Tesho Genda, you are so great. Kaido is great, and I'm so glad he gets to be one of the big One Piece big bads, because he's getting up there. He's 72. He's not going to be around forever. And yes, his Gundam roles are great, and this is one of my favorites of his. Yeah,
so it's a really lavish voice cast that we have for our main characters. And yeah, they all just stand out really well. They make such a strong impression, and especially it's that thing when you get to the end of the series, you've been on the whole journey with them. Like the personalities of all of them and how they all interact, I think just like land so well that when like you have that emotional investment very much so by the time you get to the end of the series and feel like this is our team. Mm-hmm. This is the OVA-a-thon MS team of the OVA-a-thon MS team, and it's
one of the things like the series had to do. If it didn't nail a fun team with good, more importantly, team dynamics, there just would be no show.
Yeah.
And there is. And even though, like, it's not an ensemble in the sense that, like, Shiro is the main character and always is, but you have to have those supporting characters so it feels like you are invested in the same team Shiro is. And they do that very well.
Yeah. And when you get to episode 10, or sorry, not episode 10, episode 2, one of the dynamics that I think works really well is having Shiro as the commander, but he's new. And so having Elidor and Karen be there, who are like the remainders of whatever the OVA-a-thon MS team used to be. They say that, I think in episode 1 they have a brief line where they're like, your old captain is like back at the medical hospital because of, he couldn't take the stress or like the trauma or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so it's like their previous commander, it's like the implications that the previous commander effectively chickened out because it was like too hard to be in the shit. And so they are just left here as like veterans who have been on this, front for God knows how long, fighting this shitty war in the shitty fucking jungle for no good reason. And Shiro walks into that, and particularly I think Karen, I love her attitude where she's like, she's not as high of a rank, so she can't command the battalion effectively, but she's has the experience, so she should be the one to commanding everyone.
Well, she's the jaded veteran. I actually love this as a sort of type inversion that the girl in the group is the woman, obviously, is the one who is the kind of jaded veteran. Like Sanders comes sort of close, but Sanders, I think you get a sense is he's been around the block, but in a more tragic way, and I don't know if he's ever like been in one place very long.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine him like commanding other people, or like he's a guy who's like really good at following the orders and can execute them very well, but you couldn't ever see him in command.
Yeah, but Karen is like, you get the sense that she's been in Gundam Vietnam for a long time at this point, and she's probably been in other places stationed, and she's good at what she does, and she also just has no expectations that things will ever go well, which you need in your Gundam Vietnam story.
Yeah, and she has no faith in anyone else other than herself and her ability to execute on stuff. And I just think like she's such a like vivid, effective character.
Yeah, and really these first 6 episodes are a series of very episodic single episode stories that all kind of focus on a different member of the team.
Yeah.
And I think not all of them are equally effective, but some of them are just, stone cold classics. I think Gundams in the Jungle sort of splits between Karen and Shiro a lot. Mm-hmm. The Demon Overhead episode 4 is your Sanders episode. The Broken Orders Stand By is your Elidor episode with a brutal fucking ending.
Yeah.
And then Battle Line on the Burning Sand, which is both one of the best episodes and one of the best Gundam episode titles, is your Mikkel episode.
Yeah.
And is just a fucking killer episode.
And because that's his episode, and it's like he kind of like shares double duty with Elidor on their episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
So which ones here I don't know if we need to go into each one in super depth, but they all have fun things to talk about.
Yeah, maybe just like talk about some of like the sequences from some of these episodes we really like. Which like with episode 2, I just love the whole construction of episode 2. That the first half of the episode is very much like Shiro is here, you meet all the characters, and he's immediately thrown into this mission where he's overconfident, He's an idiot, as all Gundam pilots are idiots, where it's like, you have never fought in actual gravity on the Earth before, so you probably should take it a little bit slow, but, you always have something to fucking prove. And then he gets lost, and then the second half of the episode is him, like, wandering around trying to find this one other Zaku pilot that's also in the jungle, while he's, like... And it's this feeling of, like, decompression and solitude you get after, like, the hectic chaos of the first half of the episode, and he's just, like... hanging out and, like, finds a river to drink some water and, like, washes his clothes, or he, like, falls into the mud and, like, has the leeches on him. And it's the first time this dude has ever been on an actual planet and not in a space colony before. And that feeling of just, like, space it finally gives you to just sort of sit with this character in the world, I just think is such a satisfying, well-constructed piece of storytelling.
Oh, the second half of episode 2 is one of my favorite stretches in 8th MS Team, of this, like, little kind of cat and mouse game with Shiro and this other pilot he's searching for, and as you say, surviving in the jungle, him kind of, like, when he finds his other pilot, like, getting the bead on him with the gun, and everything. Like, I think this episode makes the absolute most effective use of the just Vietnam setting, like, not like the attitudinal stuff, but I mean, like, the jungle setting itself. It's so good at that. And man, Sean, so these first 2 episodes came out on the same tape/Laserdisc. Yes. Can you imagine being a Japanese fan in 1996 and bringing this home and seeing these 2 fucking episodes back to back? How fucking revelatory that would be.
Yeah, it is, because, it's also the one thing we haven't mentioned is also, obviously, it's an OVA, so, like, the production values are so extremely high. So it's like you're getting these really well-told stories, but you're also getting them at this just, like, absurdly high quality of animation that is just, it feels so fucking luxurious.
Particularly, I think, on the mobile suits.
Yeah.
Just, they've rarely looked better. This is, like, up there, I think, with Turn A or F91 in terms of the best mobile suit animation. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, there's such a care taken to the mechanics of the mobile suits all across the show, which I think works particularly well, and it's, like, really clear in Gundams in the Jungle, because that's the one that most fully uses the juxtaposition of the mechanical Gundam with, like, the lush natural landscape of this jungle, and that, like, really nailing that sense of that these things are mechanical in an animation sense is so important. And it's something that different Gundam shows, I think, sometimes lose sight of, that, like, Tomino's Gundams typically are very good at, is keeping the sense of these are machines. Like, while they look like people, and they can occasionally move kind of like people, and we'll talk about this when we get to episode 10, how they use animation there to communicate this difference in ability with piloting them. But, like, for most people, these are just machines that are, like, moving through what are effectively, like, pre-recorded motion cycles. So it's like, when you're piloting the Gundam, you're not, like, moving different levers to move every single part of the leg to get it to step forward, right? You're basically pressing the walk button, and it starts a pre-recorded walk cycle, and it starts moving forward, and you alter it with your controls. That's, like, the logic of how they're supposed to be able to move. And this communicates that so well in the animation. And it's on display really well here in these early episodes where our pilots are less experienced. And so when they're less experienced, the motions feel even more mechanical, because they are more just, we're just doing this, like, pre-recorded, like, he's, like, move forward 2 steps, then it stops, then it crouches, then it raises the gun, then it blah, blah, blah. And it's not a smooth movement between all these different states. It's very, like, rigid.
Yes, absolutely. This episode also, we get our first meeting with Kiki, briefly.
Yes.
Who is one of the other main characters, who's part of the natives, basically, in the Gundam Vietnam. And, which they might very well be in actual Vietnam. I mean, it is Asia. They don't say where they are, but it's basically they're somewhere in Asia. But anyway, Kiki we meet in the bathing sequence briefly, which also is how you know it's an OVA, because you just have a full frontal nudity shot.
Yes, they drew the nipples on for this one. Which usually they don't. It's weird. Like, it's like, I don't mind it for the, they do it for, like, there's, like weird, like, pornographic magazines and stuff in the background that soldiers look at, and they'll draw nudity, and it's like, I think that, like, fits the tone. And it's like, you have, like, a very clear one in the ending theme song sequence that always just, like, cracks me up that they, like, put that in there. Yeah, this part with Kiki just feels very weird, and I wish they hadn't done it.
It's a little gratuitous. I mean, the scene itself is fine in so much as it's a meeting that sets up the events of episode 3. But But speaking of episode 3, which is the time limit on trust. This, I think, what you would roughly say is the Karen episode, because she's sort of leading the other half of the team, because the whole idea is they're going to try to liberate this village, and Shiro goes one way because he thinks he knows the terrain. he's an idiot. He's not an idiot, but he's overconfident again. And he says, we've got 3 hours, and so Karen leads the other side of the team, and they have to go attack this. They're not attacking the village. They're trying to attack the Zeon people who are there. And Shiro is waylaid by Kiki and the other... I guess they're the natives. They're kind of resistance fighters.
They call them the gorillas.
The gorillas, yeah.
With like gorilla fighter, they're not like silverback gorillas. Although that would also be a very good TV show.
Yeah, I'd watch that. Yeah, they should do a Gundam show that is entirely like apes piloting the mobile suits that also look like apes, and there's no English in it or no language at all. I mean, it's just like the Planet of the Apes movies with Andy Serkis. At most, they do some sign language.
That'd be a very good movie.
Yeah.
Or a TV show.
Yeah. No, 50 episodes. I want the whole thing.
Yes, a 50-episode TV show, and then give me the compilation movie trilogy afterwards with some nice film animation in there.
Yes. But no, I think this is a good one. This is another one that just in terms of the military fiction strategy aspect I love, because there's a literal ticking clock, and when you do a literal ticking clock and do it well, I'm into that.
Yeah, and this is where the ending sequence is particularly satisfying, where Shiro uses the river to sneak up on them and is jumping out of the river with the Gundam, and it's it is very cool. It's the slow build up to the military tactics of, it's a very long flanking maneuver that gets, distracted basically by Kiki's interference, and that's also where you meet Kiki's father, who is voiced by Ramba Rao, because he has to be in every single Gundam. Yep. We are not done seeing him yet, but he's also here.
He's great. I love he's got an eye patch. I love his sort of attitude where it's not that he doesn't care about Kiki. You see this in a couple episodes, but he knows she can take care of herself. So he's very a kind of hands-off parent. It's good stuff.
Yeah, but yeah, so it's so he then enlists the aids of the gorillas so that he gets, the thing that he said he had that he didn't have, which is a sense of what the landscape was. And so he uses their knowledge to help go up the river. And just using the cover of the water to help him take them out, and then he has a brief fight with Norris piling a Zaku underwater that is also very cool. Yeah. It's just I mean, all of these episodes just have some of the best action. That also, and I believe you made this comment on Twitter, and it's very true that especially in this era of the show or the first half. It is the most original Mobile Suit Gundam style action that's very focused on the details. It's not about cutting back and forth as people are shooting wildly and missing over and over again, and the kind of filler you get in a lot of action in mecha shows. It's way more about here's one decisive move that this pilot does that it destroys the other pilot. And it's an exchange of 2 to 3 moves at most. And
I posted a little clip on Twitter that blew me away. It's 10 seconds from episode 3 where Sanders is firing an RPG, and it is just the movement of he's alerted by a shot to him, shot of him pulling out the bazooka, and it is the most luxuriously animated, all the motions of that, fire, boom, dodge. It is just the succession of shots, the storyboarding, the final animation, the sound. It is just, mwah. It is so perfect. And it's some of those, I actually recorded many more moments that I put on Twitter, because this is a show I watched this time fully on my iPad, which I love to do because I can take screenshots easily, and I can just do little films and get my little clips that I put together, and those are useful to have. And it's fun. There's so many good moments like that.
Yeah, and it's just the attention to detail and the animation and the choreography. And it's just that thing that's it's one of those things that I love about OVA-a-thon team, that it just captures some of that stuff that I don't think any Gundam captures as well as the original Mobile Suit Gundam, or they often don't try to go for this thing that the original Gundam did.
You know what it feels like? It feels like, speaking of our friend Ramba Rao, I feel like this show's North Star for action is Ramba Rao versus Amuro, where the arms come off and then they rip the compartments apart and are looking at each other. That fight feels like what every fight in this show is sort of aiming for, which is really grounded, tactile, fast, and precise.
Yes, and it's it all comes down to Ramba Rao lunges, Amuro ducks, Amuro swings the sword and hits Ramba Rao. That's what that fight mostly is.
I mean, literally, in episode 10, the final blow of our favorite Gundam action sequence in episode 10 is that.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
Yeah. So, episode 3, very good. Episode 4, The Demon Overhead, is sort of our first one where we're getting a little sense of the overarching plot with Aina, because this is where we sort of see the Opsilis for the first time. And at some point in here, we meet Gineas, who is a very minor Gundam villain, but one I love because he is so fucking crazy.
He's definitely because we haven't really talked about the Ina side at all, so this is probably good.
Well, it doesn't really come in until episode 7 heavily,
Yeah.
but you do you get a little bit of her in these early episodes.
Yeah, because you're kind of checking in on them, and yes, I do like Gineas as like among the pettiest of all Gundam villains. That it's like he's just so focused on his own bullshit, doesn't care about anything else going on.
I think he kills more Zeon soldiers than any of our heroes.
Oh yeah, no, he kills almost everybody working for him, other than the people that get blown up by the Federation when they escape in that ship.
He literally does like a Jonestown, everyone drink the poison scene.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason why he doesn't blow up all the people fleeing in the ship is that he just didn't have the chance to. He probably was going to get around to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In episode 11. But yes, so the Demon Overhead is also our Sanders episode.
Yes.
Because Sanders is called the Shinigami, the death. If you know Death Note, you love that word.
Yeah, he's the Grim Reaper, the Death God, however you want to translate Shinigami.
Because he has been on a couple of teams, and in all of his teams, he has been the lone survivor, and he feels like he is jinxed because it's the 3rd mission where he loses his team. And this being the 4th episode, which is the 3rd in Gundam Vietnam, this is their 3rd mission, and he's all nervous about that. And Shiro this is where we first really get a sense of like Shiro being not just a leader tactically, but like to his men.
Yes.
And trying to be like, no man, this is okay. And of course they do win the day. I don't think this is like one of the best or most memorable episodes, but I do love me some lovable giant Tesho Genda in this one.
Yes, no, yeah. Sanders is a great character in this. Yeah, this is his standout episode. As you say, it is like among these, I think it's like the least remarkable. It's still good. Like it's still in terms of like the action you get in that second half, and particularly like desperate Sanders trying desperately to try to like make sure that this changes and like he breaks his curse. Is very good, and so it puts it above action and almost all other Gundam stuff. But for 08 the Mess Team, it is one of the least remarkable episodes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little hamstrung by this one is the only one of the first 6 that has like a heavy plot thing where it has to introduce, and it cannot resolve it because the Absolus, they have to meet it, and then it has to go away.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the idea, yeah.
Yes.
But then the 5th episode is
the rules.
5th episode rules. It's the Elidor episode where he is all excited because his song is playing on the radio, and so he just abandons his post.
Yeah, and he takes Michael with him or Mikhail to go to a town, basically to find sex workers. Like is more or less like it's like we're gonna get drunk and we're gonna get laid. He says in like not as many words. And yeah, they go down to that town. And it turns out that town is occupied by the Zeon forces with the Absolus there, and they get captured.
Yeah.
And
they get captured, they beat the shit out of each other in a sequence where I am never sure if they are consciously trying to distract the guard or
I don't think they are. I think they're legitimately, because, you know, this is where just like Elidor and Mikhail are so like such a good pair to put together because they're effectively our comic relief characters. Although, you know, I think they're like way better than just a comic relief character, but they're the most funny of the characters.
Right.
And then just getting thrown into this cell, and then them being so scared about the fact that they're going to get executed the next day, and then just so upset with each other for the dumb shit they've done, that they just start beating the shit out of each other so hard that the Zeon guard, and it's like he's like reading a magazine, and like just all he wants is to read his magazine, and he starts hearing shouting, he looks up and he ignores it. And then he hears like some slaps and punches. He looks up and he's like, ignores it, goes back to his magazine. Then he hears like chairs start breaking and furniture exploding. He looks up, he goes back to his magazine. And then when it just sounds like they're like two cats are killing each other, and he finally stands up and is like, what the fuck are you guys doing? And they're just murdering each other and they're beating the absolute shit out of each other.
And I mean, like, Elidor lays him out with a punch intended for Mikhail by complete accident.
Yeah, it's a really great sequence that is very funny and feels very true to their characters, that they are both like so caught up in their own stuff that they're just kicking the shit out of each other.
Because they are the two most sort of grounded characters in that they're not there for any ideological reason whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like both of them were drafted. You know, Mikhail just wants to get back to BB. Elidor wants to get back to his band, which, you know, the song that they play is pretty good.
Yeah.
They also use it as an insert in episode 6 and as the finale song in episode 11. So it's a nice little song. And you know, these guys just, the last thing on earth I think they want to do is be in the military. And it's just this frustration coming out. And then it ends with one of the most viscerally brutal action sequences in all of Gundam, where Elidor gets fucking shrapnel in the leg and shot in the arm. And the first time I saw this, I totally thought they were just going to kill him because it is so brutal. It's wild.
Yeah, he barely survives. It's like the bloodiest that this show gets. And it is a really like effective, especially because so much of the show, this episode is like fairly funny because it's those two characters together. It is really effective having that like harsh tonal shift there at the end. This is also where, because we haven't really talked about it with Elidor, like one thing I love about him in his role is like the whole dynamic of him in this like support truck, like that like sticks a fucking like big cable into the ground and he just like listens in, and like that's how they try to figure out where mobile suits are and stuff, is through like the vibrations of the earth.
I love the mechanics of that. It's such a good like procedural. It's like if you like submarine stories or something, it's that same kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just a really cool idea that's executed so well, and then like it's such a music and like sound being part of his defining characteristics. Because I also like, I think it's maybe in the next episode where they have, or no, it would have been in this episode or the previous one where they have the moment where he and Mikhail are both in the support van, and Eldor's got the headphones on, and Mikhail's like, oh, man, he's working so hard, BB. It's like, it's so dedicated. And then Eldor like takes it off. It's like, this song on the radio is shit.
Yeah.
It's like he's been listening to music the whole time and hasn't been paying any attention. Is very good.
I love it. And I love their dynamic of Mikhail is basically, he thinks he's going to be in a mobile suit, and he's thrown as the support to the support guy.
Yes.
Yeah. No, but it's good. Elidor gets totally fucked up. And honestly, it's an interesting thing this show does in taking one of its main characters off the board for this middle portion of the series and making you feel that absence, which I think episode 6 is very much about. And I can't really think of another Gundam show I mean, obviously there are Gundam shows where characters kind of leave and come back and stuff, but just like, seriously, like he goes off to a hospital somewhere else, and if you're a first-time viewer, you're not sure when or if he's going to come back. It's a cool move this show makes. Yeah, and
you never cut back to him in the hospital.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and if you don't watch Miller's report, you don't even see when he comes back to the team. So which is fine. Although I do like having that scene in Miller's report where you see that because it's a fun scene.
Yeah.
Because obviously he's not happy about coming back because it fucking sucks.
No.
All right, but let's talk about episode 6. Battle Line on the Burning Sand. That's such a great title.
Yeah, great title. And this is your classic middle of a season episode where they're all in the desert and they use the heat as like a metaphor for the tensions in the group rising to a boiling point. There's a similar episode in Double Zeta when they're in the jungle there, or in the desert there. It's a time-honored tradition. Like one of the great metaphors in all of fiction is using heat to represent characters getting upset with each other and passions overflowing. This is your Mikhail episode where people finally start calling him on his bullshit with BB, and it's like he's fucking up constantly because he finally got a letter from her that's like, you know what, I like you a lot, but you're also in the military, and it's like weird that this is the year 0079 of the universal century where we have space colonies and we're sending letters to each other all the time. Feels like slightly weird. I don't know. Obviously, she doesn't say that. I do just love, in order to keep the Vietnam aesthetic, they have fucking pen pals and all that shit when they're on Earth. But yeah,
it's great. I love that. I also think, I wonder if BB's like, I don't know if I want to date this 4-foot tall kid that I met in high school.
I don't think that she actually has. Like, my read on it is entirely like, they were friends. From her perspective, they're only friends. Mikhail has his whole crush on her.
Yeah.
And then once like the letters start coming, I think BB realizes, oh, he's reading something totally different in this. I have to like let him down easy. Is how I read their relationship.
Yes. So I love the setup of this one because they're trying to capture the Apsalis basically, and they are out in the desert. They know it's going to come past this point, and they have set up this good little plan of how they're going to do it. And the entire team, except Mikhail, is a pretty well-oiled machine at this point. Sanders and Karen and Shiro are all doing their jobs really well, and I love that we have the like test version of the sequence opening the episode, and then the actual full version at the end, and then the middle is just this long waiting. Yeah. And I think that's something this episode does really well, is that it's content to just not have any action for like the bulk of the episode, and it's just them waiting around for something to happen and fighting, and as you say, the tensions and the heat rising. It is a time-honored tradition in fiction, in military fiction, in all kinds of fiction, but this one just does it really fucking well, and it is gorgeously animated. Yeah, it's gorgeously animated. It's just got such a great mood. It's also just so visually distinct because you've been in the jungle since episode 2. Obviously, we were in space for episode 1. And so you have this like very different aesthetic.
I do love, because they're like basically over this massive canyon, and then in the side of one of the walls of the canyon is just carved out with a laser, so they know that the Apsaros has been here for some sort of test flight. And I love the detail that the rock has melted to glass in the path of where the laser went. It's just so... It's very Gundam, and it's just a really effective little moment early in the episode as they sort of establish what's going on, where Karen cracks it and looks at it, it's like it's glass. Like the beam weapon was hot enough to totally melt this into glass.
That is consistently something 8th MS team does well, is the heat of lasers.
Yes.
They do it here. They do it in episode 7, where they make a little hot spring for themselves. In episode 11, the characters get burned alive, and Aina gets her back burned and stuff. They remember, right, these are giant lasers with the heat of the fucking sun in them.
Yeah.
This is crazy stuff. Yes, very good. This episode also has the sequence where after kind of tensions overflow, they're all waiting around, and then Elidor's song comes on the radio. Mm-hmm. And I remember, so when I watched this again this week, I was watching through, and when you get to episode 5 and Elidor gets all fucked up, part of me was like, man, should they just, because they kind of take him out and everything, should they have just killed him? I was wondering, I'm trying to think of the version of this show where he just actually dies, and I'm like, would that, whatever. And then you get to this scene where his song comes back on the radio, and you find out he's the one who requested it, and he's out there in the military hospital requesting his own song, and I'm like, nope, they made the 100% right decision, because you couldn't have this moment without it, and that moment is a really perfect defining moment of the show for me.
Yeah, and I think it's also, Elidor being sort of the most comic relief character, the one who lifts the tone up. I think putting him off, taking him off the board, and then bringing him back in, I think signifies for the audience where the feelings are in the group and stuff like that. Yeah, and this is a classic moment, and it is that moment where the radio reads off who requested it, and it's Elidor. It is a legitimately really funny joke that then all the characters then laugh at it too, and so you're laughing along with them. Is a really great moment.
Yeah, and then you get just a rip shit awesome action sequence with the Apsalos that includes one of my favorite shots in this entire series, where Shiro is going after it and he's holding onto the side, and it just slams him into the wall of the canyon and is pulling him across.
Yeah, and it rips off his mobile suit's arm.
Yeah. That is one of those scenes where when I'm watching it, I rewind over and over to watch that shot, because it is crazy how well animated it is.
Yeah, it is. That is where you get this this is a sequence that would just not be anywhere near as impactful if you didn't have the OVA budget. The ability to see all the little bits and bobs fly off of the Gundam as it's getting its arm ripped off against the rock canyon.
Good.
It's a great shot. And then this is also pretty notable as being, up to this point, it is the first OVA-a-thon MS team episode to end on a cliffhanger, because the rest of them are completely self-contained, and they tell the whole story of the episode within that episode, and then they end on a final point. Then the next episode starts up with a different premise for that episode, and this one passes off a baton to the next episode. That the premise for the next episode is going to be Shiro and Aina together again at last. Reunion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really clear demarcation point. We've hit the halfway point of the series. Now we're kind of kicking into story mode.
Yeah.
And of course, it's also notably, if this was the first cliffhanger, the sad part about that for fans at the time is there was a 10-month delay before you saw Reunion and saw the resolution to this story, which, God, that must have been hard.
Yeah, and then this, of course, again, is where the original director dies in a traffic accident, which motivates that delay. It makes this such a weird point of where everything was in transition anyways for the show, and then to have that happen on top of all of it, leaves you with episode 7, Reunion, being this kind of weird beast where a lot of it is very good, but it also, to me, feels like a very clumsy episode having to shift gears into Romeo and Juliet mode.
Interesting, because I felt that a little bit this time, but I'm quite fond of episode 7, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. Before we get to it, though, I do have one question.
Okay.
And I don't know if... I'm wondering if you've been able to find anything on this. There are, in the versions we have now, next episode previews for all the episodes.
Uh-huh.
Were there at the time? Because, maybe for 6 to 7, if they had done some preliminary work on 7, but past this point, there are such long delays, episode to episode. I'm really curious if those were added for the DVD, or if the original Laserdiscs had them, because I kind of don't know how they would have. if it took like 10 months to do the animation.
I'm not sure. My guess is that they originally would have had them, and they may have been redone, perhaps. But I'm pretty sure that they would have originally still had the next on preview, which is just like a quick 15-second thing at the end of the episode.
They're quick, but they just have very polished, finished footage that it's kind of surprising how much of some of iconic shots from the next episode, like episode 10 ends with a preview that has the closing shot of the series in episode 11, and that didn't come out for another almost year. So it's just stuff like that where I'm like, I wonder if this was originally there. Because I know they did, when they did it on DVD, do a little bit of work on the series. On the Japanese side, it has some new sound effects and stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's very standard. You almost always, on the big home video release, you make some adjustments. I can't see anything immediate. I'm not entirely sure how to
search
Google,
for that.
how to Google that on Japanese Google. But there's nothing that is popping up immediately.
Yeah.
So I'm not
just something I thought about with this one especially, because I'm like, this is the single biggest gap in the series was 6 to 7. But yeah, I almost wonder if it was something like Evangelion near the end where they just add random storyboards. But they probably would not have done that for Gundam because they weren't doing a weird avant-garde thing.
Yes, it would have been really hard to justify that tone thing with OVA-a-thon best team compared to EVA. You could kind of get away with it at least.
Yeah, but anyway, episode 7 reunion. So this one is all Shiro, all Aina together. Like I said, I really like this one. There's the initial sequence where he has the Gundam hanging on to the Apsilus as it is flying through the air, and then he gets off and is climbing up to the cockpit. I think is one of my favorite animated sequences in the show. I really love the stuff later where they make the little hot spring for themselves. I like this one a lot, but I'm curious to hear you have more mixed feelings on it.
Yeah, I think it's mostly that that stuff is all very good. I think what makes it rough is I think the shift in Shiro and Aina's relationship from there's this, I'm kind of curious about this weird girl I met and she gave me this crazy weird clock that I've had with me. And Shiro will usually have one moment in an episode where he kind of looks at the clock, but Aina has not been an active presence in the Shiro side of the show, nor has Shiro been an active presence in the Aina side. And so for then episode 7, it goes so hard into soap opera mode where Shiro just shouts, "Aina, I love you," before he falls off the cliff and all that stuff. And I think it's just it feels like they really just needed to get that plot part out of the way so that they could move to the second half of the series rather than that character relationship developing naturally. And so it's just it feels like they, instead of having that Romeo and Juliet dial at the 2 or 3 that it had been, they immediately crank it to 11.
I mean, they crank it to full Shakespeare in the sense of they see each other and immediately declare love.
Yeah, and I think it's OVA-a-thon team has not been that up until this point.
No,
and so I think it's that's why I suspect that maybe originally there would have been some of whatever that other episode that just doesn't exist, because again, it was going to be 12 episodes always, but it was not going to have this weird thing of what we got with Last Resort. So presumably there is an episode's worth of story somewhere in here that would have existed, and I'm guessing this seems like a place that would make sense, that you would have another episode with them together before they get separated to make that transition way more natural.
Yeah, and I could see that. But for what we get, I mean, I think it does the turn to Shakespeare, maybe not fully gracefully, but I do enjoy it, and I love that it just kind of fucking commits and sticks on that path through the end.
Yeah, of all the things to kind of stumble on, this is the thing to stumble on, because it's ultimately I don't care. This is something that we talked about with our Star Wars prequel episodes. If people have listened to this, have not gone and listened to the podcast we did kind of reevaluating the Star Wars prequels, and we are generally speaking pro Star Wars prequels on this podcast. One thing we talk about there is if there's one thing that's easy for me to accept, it is 2 characters falling in love. If you just tell me that this has happened in a story, I will just go along with it, generally speaking, because it's fine. Most stories that are not love stories, that put a love story in them, don't do it well, and it's I am fine with Reunion being the way it is, because I think it fulfills the job it functionally needs to fulfill of telling me these 2 characters are in love, so that way the rest of the story can happen, and I will just accept it.
Yeah, and no doubt, just as in the Star Wars prequels, you could have done it better in making it more sort of organic to what we've seen so far. But, I am also okay with the Shakespearean something just hit them, and this is the equivalent of Romeo going to the balcony, except the balcony in this case is a giant fucking mobile armor, and Romeo is hanging on the side and about to die, and so he blurts out that he loves her.
To be fair, what makes that moment in Romeo and Juliet work a lot better is that they are 15 and 13 years old.
Good point. Good point.
Not in their mid-20s.
Yeah. I mean, yes, it's something to always keep in mind with Romeo and Juliet, is that Romeo and Juliet are kind of stupid and meant to be.
Yeah, they're children.
Yes.
Yeah, Romeo's been in one relationship with a woman before.
Yeah. And even then, I don't know. That's kind of like BB and Mikhail.
Sure, yes, yeah. He had a very BB-esque relationship with Rosalind.
Yes.
This is my hot Romeo and Juliet takes.
Yes. Listen to Weekly Suit Romeo, which is our Romeo and Juliet podcast. Why is it called Weekly Suit? I mean, branding.
I don't know. Why didn't we just call it Weekly Romeo and Juliet? We will never know.
We'll never know. But anyway, yes. I do think Romeo Reunion has quite a few good sequences. I love the different animation aesthetic in this one, where you're in the mountains and you have a lot of cold blues, which we have not gotten so far. Shiro gets fucking frostbite. That sucks. That continues through the next episode.
This is where you do get that like really evocative flashback kind of dream sequence with Shiro, where you get your first kind of hint of why he's like doing, like why he's in the military still, and all the stuff that he's doing is the colony that he was originally from and stationed at was hit with a gas attack by the Zeons. And it's like a quick 30-second sequence, but it is very, especially if you've watched like Zeta Gundam and stuff and you've seen the gas attacks in other Gundam stuff, it is like very evocative to make you immediately be like, right, this is why someone would join the Earth Federation, is because the Zeon military committed fucking atrocities in the war.
And it's literally about the contrast between a faceless enemy, which is what he saw on that day, and an enemy with a face, which is what he sees in Aina. And his only way to kind of reconcile that is to lean into the humanity of the person opposite him.
Yeah, and he has this good moment where he's like standing up on the ridge or whatever, and he says like, I hate Zeon. He uses the Watashi wa Zeon Ganda Nikui. So he uses like this really hard, like Nikui is a pretty hard word to use to describe hate. That is like the way you hate some a thing, like the way I hate the American government. I would use that word. It's like in a profound this thing is fundamentally wrong and I cannot abide it, basically. And that he uses that word and then he backs away from it with using the logic that you're saying. That's but they're good people. You're a good person. It's not I hate this thing and I hate this war and I hate what's happening here. But that doesn't mean that individual people are responsible for this.
Right. Yeah. And it's also our first in-depth showcase of the Aina character since episode 1. We didn't talk about her yet.
Yeah.
You want to quickly give us the deets on her voice actress?
So Aina's voiced by Kikuko Inoue, who, if you've watched any modern anime, you will know as the mom in every modern anime. It really is you have a main character in an anime that's been made in the past 10 years. Yes. Does that main character have a mother that is alive and a presence in the show? Yes. Then she's voiced by Kikuko Inoue because she's just she's the mom in anime. She's in a shit ton of stuff. She's in everything. She's very good. It is fun to hear her be able to voice a non-mom character because she is truly so heavily typecast in that kind of role. I like Aina. I think Aina ends up being a little bit a very standard kind of character. She's very sort of just a character stereotype at some point to me that's there's not I don't think a huge amount to talk about, which is maybe why Reunion doesn't land super hard for me, is I think they have an opportunity to develop her more, but it just kind of feels like she exists in a very clear character archetype that she doesn't do much to kind of expand on or break out of in any big way.
Yeah, I can see that. I do think she has the best name on the show, Aina Sahalin. This is not a Gundam show with a bunch of super crazy names, but I do think the phonetics of Aina Sahalin is a fun name to say, as is Guineas Sahalin.
Yes, I'm also scrolling through Kikuko Inoue's CV right now, or her credits, and I'm realizing me talking about her being the anime mom is very funny, given what's going to happen in the next episode of Weekly Suit Gundam. Something we'll talk about with her, and maybe moms. Who knows?
Well, we'll get there.
She's very much the anime mom. I was even more right about that than I realized.
Alrighty. Okay, episode 8, which is what's it called? I had it in front of me.
Duty and Ideals.
Duty and Ideals. I think this is one of the best episodes of the series.
Yes. Yeah, this is where this is what I was saying with like Reunion, which I think is a good episode that is clumsy and like it's very functional and kind of getting a lot of its plot stuff to happen. And I'm totally fine with it because then episode 8 totally like makes good on all this clumsy stuff it does.
Yeah.
Because actually, briefly on episode 7, because the other moment to me that is like kind of hard to buy is the moment where the two ships are like fighting above and Shiro runs out and it's like, why are you fighting? What are we even fighting for? And he does that whole thing. And it's just like, I can't quite buy Shiro doing this. Like,
I agree.
It's much.
The episodes following it do it much more nuanced.
Yes.
Including episode 8. But I agree. I think it's a little harsh in 7.
So that's where, like, I feel like that's what I mean by clumsy. Is it
Yes.
just like overcorrects for some things? But then you get to episode 8 where it just has to make good on that stuff, and you have this is where also like Miller's report adds a bunch of like scenes here that gives context to if you want to watch the compilation movie. He gets court-martialed effectively for being suspected to be a spy because he and Aina were trapped up there and he didn't murder this Zeon woman and you're a Federation person, so you're supposed to murder people. It's your job. And he didn't do his job, so they're gonna they're probably going to execute him if it had gone all the way to the inevitable conclusion. But Kiki's village is under attack, and so the rest of the squad learns about that. They go and they tell Shiro about it, and they're like, fuck it. Let's go do some shit. Let's go do what we do, which is protect people and help people, which is like what they want to do as a team. And so then they go and they have like what is an incredible sequence of events with the Zeon pilots, who is a group of like 3 Zeon pilots that are clearly like have been in a shit mission where everything got fucked up and they're basically kind of lost in the jungle trying to make their way back. They don't have food. They go to Kiki's village, not knowing it's a guerrilla village, to try to get food. And there's one pilot there that is just a fucking asshole, because there's always a pilot there he's a military asshole. That like the tensions are high. They make a couple of mistakes. He kind of fucks with Kiki a little bit. He kind of fucks with him back, and then everything spirals out of control. And the guerrillas are blowing up the Zakus. The Zakus are blowing up the village, all while Shiro is trying to find a way to save everything, resolve the scenario without killing anybody, which is something that, and this separates OVA-a-thon team from other Gundams that maybe try to play with this pacifism thing. We've seen a little bit in Gundam Wing. We'll see in some future Gundam shows that I like that OVA-a-thon team. Shiro has this ideal, but he's not good enough to actually execute on it. Like, he's naive in this belief that's like, I will be able to find a way to resolve this without killing the Zaku pilots. He says, I still want to save the Zaku pilots with everything else that's going on, and he can't.
No, he can't. And the episode is called Duty and Ideals.
Yeah.
And it is a very fitting episode because that is exactly what it's about. At the beginning of the episode, while he's before like the military tribunal, they ask him, could you still fire on an enemy pilot? And Shiro genuinely does not have an answer. And at the end of the episode, he fires on an enemy pilot.
Yeah.
Because there just is no other option. And it is about that, like, what is your duty? And he has a slightly different sense of that than the military itself. And his team has a slightly different sense of that. And what are your ideals? And when they come into conflict, and that second half of this episode is such a painful, lacerating example of, it's like the Kobayashi Maru situation from Star Trek, of like, genuinely there is no way to reconcile those two things in this scenario because it involves human foibles and mistakes and misunderstandings that are beyond the control of any one person.
And you don't have enough time, right? You've got minutes to make a decision on how you're going to resolve this, and there's just no way to get everything to stop to try to figure out how are you going to get people to discuss this humanely or whatever. You don't have that kind of time.
I love the other Zeon, the Zeon pilots in this. You have the woman who's sort of in charge of that little team, and you really get the sense that, but for a slight difference in circumstance, that could be Shiro. And that could be him getting his team through the desert and getting to the jungle, and they need food, and Shiro would try to do it peacefully, and maybe in this case it's Elidor's being a jackass or something, and all would go to shit, and then what do you do? And like, it's really good at presenting like these shades of gray where no one in that conflict is doing anything, I think, evil. One person does something very fucking stupid.
Yeah. And
then it is all a lot of very understandable human reactions to these things that Shiro is caught in the middle of. It really is one of the best episodes of the series.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And there's some of those, like those little moments which are things that define OVA-a-thon team, which is the way that our new Ramba Ral dies. where the one pilot who's like seems like he's like the dad. He has the picture of his kid up in his cockpit and all that kind of stuff, and he's about to use his boosters to jump. Right about as he's about to use the boosters to jump, one of the gorillas fires the RPG, hits the back of the Zaku. The Zaku angles slightly differently, and the exhaust just explodes the house that he and Ramaral dad are in and kills them.
Absolutely brutal moment. Definitely one I rewound several times.
Yes, because the animation again of like the destruction is like because it's it's this kind of wood structure with a straw roof and like all this kind of stuff. It just as everything just it gets exploded and scattered from just the heat and exhaust from the Zaku as it's trying to jump, and then it balances off, so it sort of like flips and stumbles forward. It's just that like the mechanics of the physics of how all this is happening, where things are getting destroyed even without people intending to destroy them because of the power of these machines. And it definitely is one of those moments where you feel the danger that mobile suits represent, where, I mean, the thing that the asshole pilot does initially, where he just drops his, like, heat axe, and it hits the ground and, like, tilts, and it's the size of a fucking building. And so it's like, it almost falls on this little kid, because it's so huge, as he's just trying to, like, sort of, like, passively threaten them into giving them food. And it's like all he has to do is press a button to drop a thing, and he can almost kill like 3 people.
Yeah, reminds me of like the shell casing hitting the mother in F-91, where you get the scale sense of things.
Yeah.
Let's also talk about Miller's report here.
Okay, yeah.
This is where it would have come out when it was released in theaters, and it also plays into this. Miller's report, I actually watched the whole thing this week. Have you?
I watched it this morning. It's the first time I've actually watched it all the way through. I did kind of like was looking at my phone when they were just replaying clips of the whole show. But
me too. Because it's interesting. It is not a recap of the whole thing. It is very specifically, it is framed as Shiro's court tribunal. There is this character Miller, Alice Miller, who comes in and is like interviewing Shiro and trying to figure this out and make her report. And then it is essentially a slightly, but not that condensed version of episodes 7 and 8. Yeah. It does most of Reunion, and it does most of Duty and Ideals. Like, you could, even if you wanted to, I would recommend just watching the normal episodes, but you could just go 6, Miller's Report 9. You would get most of it. And it does a little bit of episode 1, where it shows Aina and Shiro on the ship together. But other than that, like, it doesn't go into the other episodes. It does open with the end of episode 6. But it is mostly just a way to show episodes 7 and 8 with that extra context. And there's about 15 minutes of new footage.
Yeah.
And some of it's really good. I think the final sequence, which basically sets up episode 9, where Elidor comes back and Alice Miller kind of threatens Shiro and the team stands up for him, and then they all go out on their mission together that they know is probably a suicide mission, is really good. And I would really heavily recommend people see it.
Yeah, at least watch that one scene. I don't know if it, like, because like it does have little bits and pieces interspersed throughout,
right?
That are like fine, but it, like some of it is just sort of characters. It's a classic compilation movie type thing where it's like it's okay, but it is mostly characters kind of explaining things that you've already figured out by watching the episodes that they're sort of explaining. But yes, that ending sequence. That feels it feels like something that they maybe had planned to put in episode 8 but didn't have the time to. And so they're like, well, we're doing this compilation thing because it's going to be like a year before we can get the rest of these episodes out.
And in the initial Toonami broadcast of 8th MS Team, they edited all those scenes into episode 8. I don't think that cut has ever been officially released, like, because the DVDs in America all just have the normal episode 8, and there is no Japanese equivalent cut of that. Maybe a fan has done it somewhere. But yeah, I think that was an interesting thing, and probably the right call when you're airing it on Toonami to try to present that. It's certainly better than just airing, because you don't really need to see Miller's Report, the whole thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, Miller's Report released in theaters alongside the Endless Waltz movie version of the OVA, and I have to say, that would be a very good night at the movies. Because I think we have to remember, I mean, for one, Endless Waltz, that is just like the new definitive special edition of Endless Waltz, and it would have looked killer on the big screen. But the appeal of compilation movies like this at the time in Japan was not that they would be like enduring cultural artifacts you would buy on DVD and watch again and again. It was, hey, you know this thing on your TV you really like? Go see it blown up on 35 millimeter on the big screen in, you know, with like good sound and stuff.
Yeah.
And that would have been the appeal, and it would be very cool.
Yeah, and, you know, also the only other way you would have watched 08 The Mess Team is by buying VHS or Laserdiscs of it. So it's like, and those were expensive.
Yeah.
So if you just wanted to get, like, a taste of it, you could go watch the compilation. I mean, that's probably a big reason why they have a lot of the stuff from episode 1 in there, is just like, hey, did you not watch any of this? This is like the bare minimum amount of context you need to understand anything that anyone's going to talk about.
Yeah.
You need to see a little bit of episode 1. The rest of it, you can just kind of infer.
But yeah, having Miller's Report and the Endless Waltz Special Edition as a double feature in theaters would have been a night of very good OVA animation on the big screen.
Yes, it would have been. You would have just like bathed in the production values. It's like, oh my god,
absolutely,
everything looks so good.
Then you get episode 9, Frontline, which I think is kind of a transitional episode. It's setting up a bunch of stuff, and I think it's not the best episode because it is sort of more setup than anything. But it does have some cool stuff, including Gundam's parachuting down to the ground, which is just a phenomenal visual.
Yeah, that's really good. I do like all the stuff with the tank team. That they're kind of like the main adversary for the episode.
Yeah.
With the main guy there being voiced by Kinyu Horiyuchi, who we know as Jamil Neat from Afterwork Gundam X. So you get like a little bit of him there. And yeah, I do really like that moment where they have their final confrontation, and Shiro has kind of like come to his conclusion of, you know, he's kind of got over his difficulties with fighting because he realizes, like, ultimately at the end of the day, I am like the captain of this team. Like, Sanders is in danger back there. I have to fight for them. Like, and that's his conclusion. That's his answer at this point. And him going, and he destroys the Magellan attack tank thing. And then he gets a little like camera feed that pops up that shows not Jamil Neat dude like running away and smiling and waving. I really like that moment. That is another like feels like a very like callback in some ways to the tone of Time Be Still, and like the way that like the Zeon pilots are just kind of fucking around in a way to just sort of save some time and like give people time to evacuate.
Yes, exactly. Also, this one ends with Guineas going full psychopath.
Yes.
Where he is being ordered by the Zeon higher-ups to give up the Apslus project and give his like base over for launching Zeon troops off-world. And instead, he gets them all in a tunnel and blows up the tunnel and just murders the Zeon hierarchy above him so he can do whatever he wants.
Yeah, and he kills them, and then and also the pilot who just escaped from Shiro, he also dies in that explosion, which is like a very sort of like dark turn at the end there, where you like came to really like this guy and kind of respect him, and then he just gets killed for Guineas' just petty fucking bullshit he can't let go of.
He's a petty little bitch.
Yep, he's a real motherfucker.
Yep. But fuck all that. Because now we get to talk about episode 10.
Yes.
Episode 10 and 11. They're both great. The Shuddering Mountain parts 1 and 2.
But also, fantastic title.
Oh, it's
The Shuddering
so
Mountain.
So good. It's good in Japanese, too.
Yes.
What's the...
I can't bring it up. I'll bring it up in a sec. Yeah, because I can get it.
No problem.
Yes, but it is very good in Japanese.
Yes. But anyway, it's Furueru Yama.
Yes, Furueru is the word they use.
Yeah, Furueru Yama, which I really love hearing Shiro like say at the end in like the next episode preview. Episode 10 is the best episode of this series, right?
Oh, yeah. It's one of the best episodes, like in single individual episodes of a Gundam.
Yeah. And it is, so in my list of like Hall of Fame things this one has, it is just one of the best Gundam episodes because it is the best extended action sequence in the entire franchise.
Yes.
Which is the fight between Norris in the Goof, in the custom Goof, and the 8th MS team. And even before that, when he's fighting the other people, it has my favorite single mobile suit design in all of Gundam, which is this custom Goof. It has, I think, a lot of the just best mobile suit animation. Every single shot the Goof appears in this episode is a killer, perfect, wallpaper-worthy Gundam shot. Every single one.
Yeah, it is. They are all, it's that, you know, every frame is a picture thing.
Yeah.
It's like they are all the coolest picture you've ever seen in your life.
Yep. It is so good. And it builds to an absolutely killer ending where basically this entire episode is watching the 8th MS team just completely lose.
Yeah.
And then Shiro making a decision and saying something weird out of the blue and then cut to black. And if you were in Japan, you have to wait 10 months. But if you are...
Well, you cut to black and then get the words "to be conducted" on your screen as opposed to be concluded, which I love.
It's very good.
Not since Gundam F91 have you had such good bad English.
Yes. God, this episode is good.
Oh yeah, no, it's just incredible, and it's where it's part of like what you feel like in some ways the whole show has been building up to by it being the show where this is the show about normal pilots doing normal pilot stuff on the ground. It's like the most special that they are is that they're in the shitty Gundams, and like that's as special as they get. And the main dude seems pretty good as a pilot, but like he's not blowing up 5 Rick Doms in a single encounter, right?
I'm not even sure Shiro is the best pilot on the team. I think Karen might be the most talented pilot on the team.
Yeah, she's like Shiro is the most talented pilot in the sense that he's going to do something stupid that like could potentially work out well, whereas Karen is like she's going to come back from every mission alive and she's going to like do respectably well, but she's not going to go out of her way to get herself fucking killed the way that Shiro is, and because he's the main character, he will survive somehow. But so you have these normal pilots doing normal pilot shit, and then you have Norris, who's like captain of like the guard or whatever for this like really prestigious family that grew up on Side 3. You have in one of these 2 episodes, you have that brief flashback to you have like Norris and Guineas and like little girl Ina, and it's like in their home in the colony, and you see like they live like a mile away from the fucking Zabi palace that's in the background, right? So it's clear this family was just kind of falling on somewhat hard times because Guineas is a petty bitch. That generally speaking, they're effectively like Xeon royalty. And so he is like the surrogate father who is like helped raise Ina and all this stuff. And he's like the elite motherfucking dude. And he has a Goof custom. Like the Goof is already a great mobile suit that is like more or less on par with the capabilities of the RX-78-2 Amuro's Gundam. This is an even better one of those. And so it's a great pilot in a great fucking mobile suit, and as soon as the OVA-a-thon team encountered them, the first thing they were like, oh, I think Sanders says it, this guy's an ace.
Yes.
Like we have run into an actual ace pilot, and it puts everything else you have seen in the show into such stark perspective on what you are normally seeing when you are watching Gundam. You're usually seeing things from Norris's perspective. Now you're looking at it from the other side.
You're usually seeing it from Shiro's perspective, you mean, right?
Norris. Yeah, you're usually you are from the ace, right? You are Amuro, who is going, and you're fucking fighting the Black Tri-Stars and their 3 experimental Rick Doms, and you kill all 3 of them in one episode. Like that's who you usually are with.
I thought you meant for this specific show.
No, for this, for this episode now, instead of being you are the ace Gundam boy, you are 23-year-old Amada Shiro, who's pretty good.
Yeah,
but he's not this good.
No, and. Yeah, and I love, like, so Norris has been a character through all these episodes in the background, but I also think one of the most impressive things this episode does on a narrative level is making him a great 3-dimensional character for this 30 minutes where he will be our antagonist.
Yeah.
You know? And, like, this is his time to shine, and just putting that into focus where, like, he loves Ina as, like, a daughter. He's a very like upstanding, noble person. I don't know if he has any like higher Xeon ideology other than he is like this person's bodyguard, but he fully believes in that. And if what Ina wants is to get this medical ship evacuated, which is a noble thing, like Ina is kind of in Shiro's position, where she is just trying to do the most good she can in the position she's in, and this is what she wants to do. And there are a bunch of anti-air tanks out there, and so Norris is like, all right, I will go get rid of those anti-air tanks. And he does it. He wins. Yeah. That's part of what makes this episode so good, is that he dies. But I love that the final moment is as Shiro is swinging the sword to cut him in half, he just smiles and goes, I win.
Yeah.
And he does, because he has gotten the line of sight on the final anti-air tank, and he blows it the fuck up, and they lose.
Yeah. It's a just incredibly powerful conclusion to just like this incredible sequence of events where you do have that great scene early on establishing, like, it establishes Norris's motivation. It sort of is one of my favorite moments with Ina, like her scene with Norris there, and then he leaves and she has this great line where she sort of just says to herself, if he dies, I'm the one who has killed him, because she's basically given him these orders. And then you just have, what you need with any great action scene. Let's go back to our classic reference of the Seven Samurai with the fucking map. Yes. You have to set up the stakes. And so at the beginning of the episode, you set up the stakes of the OVA-a-thon team are here guarding these 3 gun tanks because they are the ones who are bombarding the base where the Absolus is. And it's like, and what Norris needs is to kill the gun tanks, and what the OVA-a-thon team needs to do is to protect these 3 gun tanks. It's like very specific, and they're in this little ruined city. And so you have this really great sense, even before Norris gets involved, you've already seen elements of the city, and you have a sense of the space and like the destroyed highway that's kind of running around it, and where the 3 gun tanks are. And then you have Norris come in, who also comes in the coolest way. It's like he's the fucking T-Rex in Jurassic Park, where they basically, it's like the reason why I think they have Elidor. They had this idea This like we want to do this kind of scene, and so it's like we need to have the character who
Yeah.
has the ear thing, so they can hear and be like, something's coming. Something's big, and it's like, it's an elevator. It's coming up right from under us, and the Goof just fucking shoots up out of the ground. It stands up on this fucking building and looks down at them with its single fucking Cyclops eye.
I have the shot, because I took all these screen caps of this episode, and the first shot when he's out in the town where he is standing on this ruined building with the sword out, he is framed by the sun, and then you go in close, and yes, you have the single eye searching, and now they're going to have to fight this dude. You have him coming up in the elevator is so good, just again, the coolest goddamn mobile suit, animated so ludicrously well.
Yes, the spirit of Ramba motherfucking Rao lives on with Norris in the Goof custom.
Oh, it's good. And then basically the first part of this sequence is a slasher movie. Like literally, he is going around
with a fucking Gundam machete.
Yes, I mean literally, like I have the clip because I could not help but film this clip. I don't know if it'll play. Well, it's not going to play for you guys on the video, but you can see it on my Twitter account where he just stabs into that gun tank and is like splattered in oil and blood on the Goof's face, like he's fucking Freddy or something.
This is how Samurai Jack happened. Gendy Tartakovsky, I hope he watched this at some point. He's like, I have to make a TV show where this happens 50 times every single episode because this is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
I mean, Sean, here it is. Okay, so here it is playing, and I just love first the eye kind of looks over at Karen, and then it goes down and just stabs and has the oil just splatter its face.
Yeah, and this is where you get this payoff of what I was saying earlier, where the way that the mobile suits are animated in the OVA-MS team is very mechanical, as opposed to, by the time you get to stuff like Zeta Gundam, it starts becoming a little bit more humanistic, and then by the time you get to Gundam Wing and stuff like that, they're just like big robot people, basically, is how they're animated most of the time. OVA-MS team, you don't really have that feeling until the Goof shows up, because the way the Goof is animated is so fluid, and especially when Norris is like running and the Goof jumps and it has the fucking grappling hook, because the only way to make the Gundam or the Goof cooler is to take the heat rod it used and then turn it into a fucking grappling hook also. So he's fucking swinging around on shit. And so in the way it moves, it's just like a human body. And this sense of Norris is such a skilled pilot that the Goof is a natural extension of who he is, rather than it being this like mechanical like machine. He's not piloting a car; he's like piloting an exosuit. Is basically the difference for him.
Yes, and I think that's part of why this whole episode and sequence hits so hard, is the 9 episodes leading up to it of establishing a very different kind of piloting.
Yes,
as you said, and like the attention to detail is so good. I also love that he has 3 different major weapons he's using.
Yes.
He's got this big, giant fucking Gatling gun, which, Sean, you have your 1/144th model gunpla of the custom Goof here, and you can just see in that, because the turret thing he has is attached to the shield, and if you line it up, like, it's basically as tall as the entire mobile suit itself.
Yes. Like, if I positioned the arm to be straight down, he would be, like, lifting off of the ground on top of it like it's a fucking cane, basically, because it's so long.
It's so long. He's got this amazing sword. I fucking love the sword he uses in this episode.
It's just a big fucking hunk of sharp metal.
Yep.
Like, I just love the idea of, like, the scale, how big his giant fucking machete sword is fucking ridiculous.
Like, and it's not like a heat axe or anything. It's just a sword.
Yeah, it's just a big piece of sharp metal he uses to cut fucking robots open with.
Yep. And he has the grappling hook that electrocutes things.
And he's got a little hand cannon, which is underneath the shield that he also uses, which is how he destroys the last gun tank as he uses that.
Yeah, and the shield is effectively a weapon also because he uses it. So, like, in the span of this one episode, he's using all these different tools. It's completely fluid. You have these amazing, like the scene where he's grappling, like, basically down the building to get that one shot.
And that's where you get the thing that I'm talking about with, like, the mechanics of it, where, you know, he's falling down the building and Sanders is like, oh, I can shoot this guy because I can calculate, even if I can't see him, we can just calculate where he's going to be because he's falling, and this is physics. And so he's like calculating, he's using the computer and the Gundam to calculate it, and fires a shot, and it misses because Norris is using the grappling hook to alter his rate of descent. And it's just like the way that the other pilots are relying so completely on like their instruments. And it just feels like Norris doesn't need that. He has this moment where he shouts at Shiro from his cockpit, basically. It's like, you know, die regretting that you're a pilot, that wasn't able to make full use of your suit.
Yes.
And it's like, that's a fucking great line to shout as you're like murdering all these people in your giant fucking robot.
Okay, we're going to get very detail-oriented here.
Yeah.
But Sean, the specific shade of blue
Yes.
they use in the animation of this episode, and that Gunpla actually really nails it.
Yes.
More than any other maybe Gunpla I've seen in terms of capturing the hue from the episode.
I mean, there's a reason why this is the second Gunpla I ever built. I had to make the Gundam first, and then I was like, well, once I've made the first Gundam, which feels like you are like contractually obligated, or at least I felt that way, to do that first. I was like, now it's time to get down to some real business and build this fucking goof.
It's so good, but the specific hue of blue they use, both the light blue and then the darker blue on the skirt, is so fucking good. And also, the red eye.
Yes.
I don't think the red eye on a Zaku or Zaku-esque machine has ever been used more effectively in Gundam than it is in this episode.
Yeah, it's just like legitimately terrifying.
Yes.
Yeah, the way that it like, because it's also the way they frame it and the way that it looks like with the like angle of the goose sort of like visor is it always looks like it's just glaring menacingly, rather than like the Zaku sometimes looks like slightly cute with the way the eye looks. It's like very easy in like some framings that it looks kind of cute. Here it's just like, this is a fucking monster.
Oh, it's so good. All of its poses, all of its motion, all of the way they frame it in the episode. Like I have a shot here where it's just billowing smoke over it with the red eye going through it. I mean, they knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And they executed so perfectly. But it's not just the goof. It's also what the entire 8MS team is doing.
Yeah, it's the whole framing and pacing of this action scene as... it opens with the 8MS team, like them being like, okay, we've got this because we're a whole squad versus this one enemy goof. And they very quickly start to be disabused of this notion that they are in any ways fine with this until eventually like Shiro just shouts like, guys, he is better than we are. Like, we have to be careful because he is better than us. Like, definitively, we are going to lose this fight.
I mean, frankly, the only reason they don't all die is Norris doesn't take them that seriously.
Yeah, and it's not his objective. Like, he's trying to get rid of the gun tanks as quickly as possible so that the ship can leave. So he's not bothered with these Gundams. It's not his objective.
And in addition to all of that, it just builds to such great character moments where Shiro, he tries to go up against the goof. It easily takes him out and gets all of his circuitry down. So Shiro is stuck in the dark and is trying to put it all together, and that's the moment where he realizes he is just fucking terrified of dying. And I can't think of another Gundam scene that nails that sense of being about to be killed by a fucking rival ace pilot. And it's you just get the sense of he is seconds away from having his life snuffed out. And that feeling of fear and desperation is so well done. And then him screaming, "I want to live," as he shoves the giant floppy disk into the core and gets his Gundam back up and running. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, I mean, that scene is why you get Nobuyuki Hiyama to voice that character, is for him to just scream, "I want to live." Yeah, and that sequence in particular, directorially, is so well done. And they kind of set up a similar thing in the previous episode with Karen, where she can't see because her main camera has been destroyed. Because that's another thing to say, is that her Gundam also has a GM head on it for the whole episode, which is very good and very OVA-a-thon team. That's we don't have a spare Gundam head, but there was some destroyed GM at some point along the line, so they just fucking put the GM head on it so she could have her main camera.
Yeah, Sanders is the last one standing with an actual fully functioning Gundam.
Yes, and so you have a sequence when she loses her main camera in episode 9, where Elidor is shouting at her to aim it, and you have a long sequence that is just from her perspective in the cockpit, and you don't have any of the information of what's going on outside.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, and that's really good. And then they one up it here by having it happen to Shiro, and his whole power system just basically short circuit, and he's completely blind. And from that moment, you are stuck in that cockpit for a minute of him just sitting there, not knowing what's happening. Having no idea what's going on, just shouting, basically, "Just kill me, just end it. What are you even doing?" Until eventually they finally will cut. And it's such a relief when it just gets you out of that cockpit, because it's such a claustrophobic moment. And you see that fucking Norris is using him as a shield.
Yes.
And so he's worth more to Norris alive in that moment, so Norris can get one of the other gun tanks.
Yep, and it is very good. And then, when he gets it back online... Shiro rips off one of the Gundam arms and starts beating the goof with it. What an idea! What an execution!
Yeah.
It is so good.
Shiro Amada, a fucking legend. Like, this is the man who fucking took out Izaku with a ball in episode 1.
Yes.
He's the fucking, who gives a shit? I don't need both arms. He doesn't have the fucking rest of the weapons in his Easy 8 Gundam. So he just rips off the fucking forearm with the other arm and just starts wailing the Goof with it.
I mean, Shiro might not be the best pilot, but he might be the scrappiest.
Yes. Yeah, he's definitely, like, and you get the sense of, like, where Norris has this respect for Shiro in fighting, and Gishido is also, he's the only one who can, like, manage, like, not hold his own, but, like, not just be immediately destroyed by Norris. Like, because this is also where you start to see with Shiro that his Gundam is also animated a little bit more humanistically, like when he's fucking like falling against this water tank and using it to like slow his descent and all this stuff. Like Shiro is clearly like learning and trying to adapt to this fighting scenario. And then that culminating with him fucking ripping the arm off and being like, I want to live, motherfucker. I'm going to beat you, this like, an animal that like bites off its foot to escape a trap. It's like, I'm just going to fucking I need to survive this.
And the animation on him ripping the arm off and them showing like every fucking circuit and wire being torn in half.
Cables ripping and just electricity shooting all over the place.
Oh, it's so good. I mean, it's like, and you could probably like recreate that with a gunpla because they're opposable and you can take the pieces off. And I love it. It does have that feeling of like pulling off one thing and it's just, it's so good.
It's fucking amazing. Yeah.
And of course, leading then to the ending that we already talked about of Shiro kind of getting the advantage, but that's because Norris is perfectly prepared to die and he has strategically outmaneuvered, and fuck it, he's gonna die. He completed his mission.
Yeah, Norris knows he was almost certainly going to die anyways because I mean there's no backup that's coming. Everybody's trying to get off of Earth. He's like the last dude there. So it's like, what does it matter to him? He's either gonna die in this fight now, or in like accomplishing his objective, or fail at the objective, survive for a little bit, and then get killed by the giant Federation army that's like come right at his back.
I mean, literally I think it's at the halfway point before the like the eye catch or something, but it's near there where he smiles and says, "This is a great place to die."
Yes, yeah.
He's in for a penny, in for a pound, and he wins.
Yeah,
and that is part of what makes this such a great action sequence. Is, I mean, they live, and that's nice. But he won. He beat them. It's so good.
Yeah, and then you get that great kiss-off moment with Shiro where he, like, steps out of his cockpit and just says, I'm leaving the service. Like, I'm done. Like, it's just this feeling of, like, he realizes, what the fuck am I even doing here? Like, he realizes, like, he's not Norris. Like, he's not that fucking dude. Like this is not his life. He's not a, like, professional soldier. What is he even doing here?
Because we also get the after that happens, the Apsilus comes out and like does the big what we find out in the next episode is a warning signal, but does this big shot, and he looks up at the Apsilus. He knows that Aina is up there, and that's when he stands up and says, "All right, I'm out."
Yeah, it's like, I'm good. Like, what are we even doing here? Like, I love that woman up there. I don't really like want to fight people. There's like clearly this experience he had with Norris was not fun. He did not enjoy this. In the way that Norris was having a great fucking time. He loved the shit out of that fight. That's not the kind of guy that Shiro is. It's like, I'm good. I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna go try to save my girlfriend. If you guys want to go home, that's cool. Anyways, I'm out.
Yeah. I will never forget seeing this episode for the first time and getting to the end of that and just feeling like I took a breath for the first time in half an hour and like, oh my god, and then immediately hit play on the next episode, which people in Japan could not do at the time, which sucks for them. But man, and honestly, Sean, it was kind of, I was half super excited to see this episode again and half dreading it a little bit because I had so built it up in my head.
I was in the same place.
From my first viewing, I was like, is it as good as I remember? No, it's better.
It's better. Yeah. It was like, it's been a couple years since I watched it, and it's better.
Yeah.
It's just like, especially because I think why I was like, is it maybe not as good as I thought, because I watched like clips from it on YouTube, and it was like, it looked really good, but I'm like, but it's not giving me the feeling of actually watching the fight, and then watching, and it's because it's a fight that you can't clip easily for a YouTube thing, the way that some Gundam fights you can, because it's like, it's the whole episode is that fight. Even when they cut away, it is building up the tension of this confrontation. It's like, you need the full context of everything that's happening to really appreciate the tension that's occurring.
I mean, that episode has a singular focus, and every single shot, every cut, everything is building, is helping to contribute to this single combat.
Yeah.
And episode 11 is not quite on that par, but it is still
It's very good.
top tier Gundam.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is... One thing I love about episode 11 is it feels like it manages to conclude the series while keeping it, like, very close to the heart of, like, what the OVA-a-thon team is about, in the sense that, like, there's no huge, like, crazy climactic battle that Shiro has with the Absolus or whatever. Like, yeah, like, he goes up and punches it or whatever and kills Gineas. But it's not, you know, they had their huge action climax in episode 10, so that way episode 11 is mostly just about, like, the character drama in the relationship between Shiro and Aina, and I really like, because I couldn't remember exactly whether or not there was, like, a huge fight with the Absolus, and watching it again, I'm like, there was a relief of, like, yes, they made the right choice in not having this be a big, protracted fight with this giant mobile armor, because that's not what the show is about at this point.
Yeah, and also, like, they wouldn't really stand a chance if it was one-on-one combat with that thing. So it's much more about, like, the larger, also, like, military infrastructure going on there, and that the Federation probably would have taken it down one way or another. It's about the amount of loss.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's that thing where Gineas is utterly delusional. Like, like Zeon has basically lost at this point anyways. They certainly lost any foothold they had on Earth, because everyone's leaving to go fight at Solomon. And
even if that thing got into space, Amuro would take it out pretty easily.
Yes.
Because we've seen him do it to other mobile armors.
Yes, like, the Absolus is cool. It's not Big Sam cool.
No.
That ain't no Big Sam. There ain't no Dozel Zabi fucking piloting that thing. You've got this little shit motherfucker in there.
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to stand up on the top of the Absolus and fucking fire a rifle at a Gundam with a giant, like, phantasmical demon bursting out of his back, right?
Yeah,
That's not who Gineas is. Gineas sucks.
No, I think Amuro would take it out in, like, one shot.
Yeah.
He would have his new type sense of, like, I'm going to aim here, and it would be gone, and he would never think twice about it.
Yeah, if Gineas and the Absolus were there, like, it would be less the Big Zam and the fucking giant snake thing that he blows up in the one, or, like, the dumb, like, Zacrello or whatever it's called.
Yes.
In that one episode. That's, like, a throwaway mobile suit that Char's like, it's fine that thing died, because I didn't even know we had it.
Yeah.
So I didn't really count it in, like, when I was taking stock of our military resources. It's cool if it blew up.
Yeah, exactly. I do think episode 11 is incredible at imparting a sense of scale.
Yeah.
Because this is called the Shuddering Mountain for a reason. They are on this giant fucking mountain. I love all those shots of Aina standing out on the cockpit, just seeing the whole horizon and the mountain range and all the destruction that it can do. The sequence with the medevac ship trying to get out and then the Federation blowing it up. All the stuff at the end with Shiro going up there and trying to save Aina. And it just, in my mind, actually, it's even bigger than it actually is on screen, because it does such a good job evoking, like, the size of the area they're inhabiting.
Yeah, you have that incredible moment where Aina, after the medical ship gets exploded, Aina shoots the laser cannon and hits that mountain and, like, melts half the mountain.
Right.
That definitely sells the scale of the kinds of, like, weaponry you're seeing here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, of course, basically an entire Federation fleet is coming up on Shiro's heels at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's so good. The medevac ship being blown up, and that's a pretty powerful. That's one of the darker things this show does.
Yeah.
In sort of painting, you know, it doesn't go into full both sides, everyone's equally bad, but it does, like, the Federation sucks, and we know the Federation sucks, and it definitely gives Shiro and Aina some fuel for their this entire thing is stupid belief.
Yeah, and just the sense of, like, it puts you into perspective of, like, at this point, a lot of these people in the Federation are fighting just to win the war. Like, they're not fighting for any, like, greater purpose or anything. And especially not, like, the fucking mustache motherfucker in this one, who is a very good, evil, like, military commander type character.
I mean, it's like burning the fields down as you go through the campaign, right?
Exactly,
It's that kind of thing they're doing. And I like the evil military commander contrasted with the guy that we've seen a couple times who's, like, the like general for
Kojima.
Kojima.
The main, like, commander.
He
has that great kiss off line where the general dude says, like, I hear those offices in Jaburo are, like, nice and comfy, as a way to be like, hey, like, don't tell anyone about the war crimes I've committed, as Kojima starts to leave. And Kojima's just like this great callback to episode 2 where he says, I've always told you I just can't stand air conditioning, and he leaves. It's like, fuck yeah, dude, that was great.
He leaves with the high ground intact.
Yeah.
Yes. I also love his just utter exasperation at this point with Shiro. Because he's a good dude. He doesn't want to, like, execute Shiro. He knows they might have to do a court-martial or something. But he's like, just go get this fucking idiot for us.
Yeah.
He's not going to do something crazy and, like, put a sniper in place to kill him like the other guy does. But he's like, I really have had it up to here with this dumb romantic kid. Because he's got a job to do. Come on.
Yes. It's where you have, where Karen, as Shiro leaves at the beginning of the episode, Karen, there's that whole like weird standoff where they were like told to kill Shiro if he leaves, and obviously they're not going to do that. But Karen just says, "You are the worst soldier I have ever met," which like that line I think lands really hard. It's very true.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you're trying to get the job done, he's sometimes he's helpful. Sometimes his ideals maybe fuck you up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he's just like Shiro is a great guy. You don't want him in the military because it's not a good fit for him.
He's too much of a free thinker.
Exactly.
He hasn't been like Arlie Ernied out of his personality.
Exactly. And this is the thing that's great because it then means that Shiro never has to like live and grow up to be a fucking fascist. He gets to go be his own man. Thank God.
Yes, exactly.
Get out of that ship while it's sinking.
Abso-fucking-lutely. I think the resolution of everything with... I like that it comes back to the Shakespearean pitch of, like, Aina being shot in the chest and fought by her brother and falling off the ship and being caught by Shiro, and then it turns out it's the watch that saved her, and then they romantically go to kill Guineas together, and it's ambiguous what happens to them. I mean, I think it gets that... This is where the soap operatic tone, I think, pays off.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And it's like, pushing the scale to this like great heights with the mobile armor and the level of destruction you're seeing, and having it all come back to the fucking watch from episode 1 that stops the bullet. Yes, it's very soapy, but like you said at the top of this podcast, like at least OVA-a-thon MS team understands when it's operating that register, that it is operating in that register, as opposed to Stardust Memory in its finale, which is even soapier than this bullshit, and it has no conception that that's what it's doing.
No, and honestly, maybe soapy isn't even the right term. Maybe melodrama is better, but it's got... Either way, like, it knows the virtues and values of the register it's working in, whereas Stardust Memory feels like it is trying to be like a big awards-winning movie, and instead it's like a daytime soap just that like ran out of ideas. Like the fucking soap parodies on Friends that like Joey is in.
Yeah.
That's what Stardust Memory's finale is.
Yes.
It's that. This is the good shit. This is like... It's a tearjerker in exactly the right way. I remember the first time I saw it, it had me on the edge of my seat where I was like, oh God, is Aina, like, because if you're going Shakespearean, that feels like the brother killing her. That could have been the ending, and then maybe Shiro kills himself trying to get him. That would be very Romeo and Juliet. I think the way they do it is even better, but like, it had me effectively on the edge of my seat. And the second time, even knowing what was going to happen, I was like, God, she really did take that bullet, and I forgot that they were going to bring that back.
Yeah, like, I legitimately was like, because it's been long enough since I watched this, I was like, did she actually die? Because I remembered her living. I remember that she and Shiro get together at the end. But I was like, maybe I'm just forgetting something. Maybe she actually does just get fucking got in this episode.
Yeah, it's effective.
Yeah.
It's just very effective. And the desperation of that final move where they've got a Gundam that's missing a bottom half because it's been burned off. Like, and also like its shoulder, like when the sniper, like I said about all the shots where they remember that the lasers are very hot and burn things.
Yeah.
And then it's just going in to punch Guineas through the cockpit and gets burned out, and you don't know what happens. And then I think ending it, the like final pre-credit scene being the entire 8th MS team running out, shouting "Commander," trying to find him, is a really effective ending.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, it lands all the character dynamics you need. It nails the Shiro Aina stuff, even if that, like, sometimes the transition into this mode was a little bit clumsy. It's like, it doesn't matter if they land the ending, right? If the transition was a little bit awkward.
Yeah, it's perfect. I really love the end credits doing the Elidor song over these kind of romantic images, and then ending with something that I think you can read in a couple different ways. It's ambiguous, like, is this a vision? Is this the reality of them walking out together? But it feels like just right to me. And it has some really great shots in there as well. Like, I love the one of like the lone cross on the like bed of dirt and rubble. Oh, it's good. And I think it nails something. I think Shuddering Mountain Part 2 nails something that is really a tradition for Gundam, particularly the Tomino Gundam, where Tomino likes to do the denouement tied into the climax.
Yeah.
Where we end in the action, and it's not that it doesn't resolve its themes, it's just it's so good at doing it all through one big piece of action. OG Gundam does it. Zeta Gundam is really good at it.
Zeta Gundam is definitely like the epitome of that, where it is like truly in the midst of the climax, the ending occurs.
And Char's counterattack too. I mean, Char's counterattack just ends on the flash of light.
Yeah,
I mean,
it ends on, she was like a mother to me. What the fuck did you just say? And then everyone explodes.
Yes, exactly. And it's perfect. And this is basically that kind of thing. And it's why it feels like such a perfect ending. And I wrote this, like, if 11 is considered the actual end.
Which it is.
It's just one of the great mic drops.
Yeah.
It is a perfect, like, we did it. We impressed you. We blew your mind. Done.
Yes. I mean, it fades to black and the words "the end" come up on the screen. It is the ending. And it is that thing of where, because now we have to talk about episode 12.
I was so confused the first time I watched this, Sean, because I wasn't reading the Japanese wiki. All I knew is that there were 12 episodes in my queue, and there was another one, and I get to the end of Shuddering Mountain 2, and I'm like, what? How? What?
It said, it's like, it didn't put the normal ending theme in there. It did. It's just like a new theme over the credits as they're showing you story, and then it fades to black and says the end. That is the ending of an anime series.
I know, but I was so
confused. And then if you're watching it in the Western context, you're just given another episode, which I don't remember what my reaction was originally, because I've only ever seen. I guess this is now the second time I've seen Last Resort, which is the 12th episode, or the special episode, whatever you want to call it. This is the second time I've watched it. I had very little recollection of it whatsoever. Like, I had a vague sense of, like, right, there was this weird epilogue-y thing. I didn't remember anything about it at all. Because I think I have a vague sense of that. Afterwards, I looked up and, like, got that sense of, okay, maybe it was, like, a weird thing, but I'm not sure. But I do think it's frustrating to me that the Western, like, whatever it is, what the distributors, whoever is, like, responsible for, like, packaging and, like, advertising it this way, don't. But, like, it should say in the Blu-ray menu or whatever, it should say, like, special episode.
Put it under bonus features.
I mean, something like that, because that is what it is. Like, it very much, but in the English Wikipedia, it doesn't separate it out in any way. It just says episode count, 12 episodes, and you click on the list of episodes, and it gives you those 12 episodes. And then the Japanese Wikipedia says, nope, this is 11 episodes with some weird thing that came out later. That's one episode, and then they also made that movie.
Yeah, and the thing is, even if it was a really good episode of Gundam, it would be weird coming off of episode 11.
Yeah, there's no place for a big epilogue story, really.
And I don't think it's good. I think this is a terrible episode.
I think it's like, it would be fine as like a weird little Gundam side thing, removed of the rest of OVA-a-thon Mess Team, as like, here's just a little story about like some new type kids in the fallout of the 1 Year War. It's not great. I would be like, okay, it'd be like the MS Igloo, or like there's a bunch of these little like things like scattered across the legacy of Gundam, some of which we've like, I mean, we haven't hit most of them yet, because most of them are like in the early 2000s, where they've done a bunch of like weird little ones. Like the one that they did with the OVA-a-thon Mess Team, this like the Battle in the Third Dimension or whatever. Like, here's just like a weird thing that they made for like a anime festival or something at some point on like an anniversary, and it's just out there. If it was something like that, it would be like, I would have checked it out once when I was watching every single thing I could absolutely see that had Gundam in it.
Yes.
And then have completely forgotten about it. It is extremely weird, and in the juxtaposition with it being attached to one of the best Gundam series, in that light, it is really bad. Like, if you watch it thinking it's episode 12, it's like inexcusably awful. Like, it's just terrible in that
Which
context.
is how I saw it the first time.
Yeah.
And you'll even, if you go back to our first, to our episode where we did the original Gundam movie trilogy and like the 1 Year War wrap up, you'll hear me be very confused and say that like, because it's honestly kind of a downer because I just binged it. I think I did the last 6 OVA-a-thon Mess Team episodes in one sitting the first time I watched it. And so it was super weird. Knowing that, I mean, I can separate it. Honestly, this time, Sean, this episode bores me to such tears that I just skipped through most of it. Like, once I would get to a scene, I would just go, 30 seconds ahead, 30 seconds ahead. Okay, now something new is happening. No, this isn't good either. 30 seconds ahead, 30 seconds ahead. And I was trying to get, and I was like, I remembered, well, there is a scene with Shiro and Aina. Kind of there isn't, though, because you just see them, and their voice actors aren't even credited because they don't have lines.
Yeah, I mean, they only got 2 of the characters back
to do
it. Like, it is a thing where again, there's no like official documentation because I don't think anyone would have said this, but it very much, I'm pretty sure, is just we had a contractual obligation to make a 12th thing. Because also, it is utterly bizarre to take the 08th team, a thing that is the furthest from new types like any fucking One Year War thing is, and then do your epilogue story vaguely. It's not really an epilogue story, but what is vaguely positioned as an epilogue story, and have it be about a bunch of kids who have escaped the Flanagan Institute.
It's so weird.
Yeah, it's like, it has this sense of someone had like a short story from an anthology collection that never got picked up or something, just lying around and like, let's turn this into an episode.
It is also so clearly struggling to hit 30 minutes because this entire episode is just a series of red herrings on... Because really what it is it's trying to give you more closure on Shiro and Aina. I would argue you don't need that after episode 11, but I can see maybe having the desire for that. So if you want that, that's what this episode is offering to give you. And instead it just keeps kicking you in the nuts with like these different like red herrings where it's like, I am Shiro Amada, and it's like, he's our commander, and then you meet him and he's a kid. And then it's like, this was Aina, she's dead, and it's like this body wrapped in bandages. And I remember being so frustrated by how much this episode is like kicking you in the wind, like just, you feel like you're fluttering out there through all of it, because it's like, because at first you're like, is Aina dead? That's fucking dark. And then you're like, no, this is someone else, and we actually took our names, and they gave up their names, and and it just is like, this basically, it is an episode, it is a filler episode at the end to get to a final scene that gives you truly nothing new beyond what episode 11 already gave you.
Other than that, Aina is pregnant, and that apparently in his retirement, Shiro has taken up turtlenecks. That is like the two pieces of information you've learned: turtlenecks and babies.
That's it. And I would argue nothing substantive is there. So it is basically like, it is very weird for the finale of an anime to be filler, but that is what this feels like.
Yeah. Which again, it's not actually the finale. It is this.
I know, but
it's like the weird context, like the messed up context we get it in over here. And it's like it just feels cheap in a lot of ways as well. Like just this sense of they only had Mikael and Kiki probably just like to keep the cast down, the cast number down, and like maybe other people had other commitments that other projects they moved on to or something like that at that point. Because it's also like those are two characters that are like, I have no interest in seeing those two characters together. No. Like there's no like interesting dynamic with the two of them. Like I like Kiki, I like Mikael. They're fine characters on their own, but like as a pair, there's not a lot of like spark there.
I mean, if this had been a Karen Sanders story and nothing else different, it would automatically be like 3 times as good.
Or Mikael and Elidor, or Elidor and Karen, or Karen and Kiki would be a way better pairing than Mikael and Kiki.
And it's probably because those are the two like lowest key voice actors in the cast. Like,
I mean, generally speaking, yes.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, all the other ones are huge stars.
They've been in, they have like a fine record, but they are not like huge.
They're not Tesh Ogenda. I mean,
exactly. Yeah,
not to be rude or anything, but just some people are more famous, and like it's a weird choice. I mean, I said this on Twitter last night. If you are watching 8th MS Team for the first time, watch the 11, and if you are really curious, like wait a week and then do 12. Just like wait long enough that like it's not going to like. Just know that it's not the finale.
Yeah, watch Last Resort only as a... Last Resort is my pun there. That's like not really what I mean, because that's way too mean. Like, it's a curiosity, is what it is. And in that context, it is totally fine as a weird Gundam curiosity if you want to watch all Gundam stuff. It is a thing where if you bought the full season of 08th MS Team on Japanese Amazon, you would only get episodes 1 through 11, and you would not get Last Resort because it's not in that pack.
That's pretty much how it should be.
Yeah. It is on the Japanese Blu-rays and all that stuff. I was trying to see if I could find like a high resolution image of like the back of one of the Blu-ray boxes to see if they like labeled it differently, but I couldn't find anything. Because I suspect also those menus label it as Tokubetsu Hin, which is the phrase they use for like special part, basically.
Yes. So it's weird. It does not like, especially on a second viewing, it does not factor into my analysis of the series because you really do understand, and especially with the context you've given us of like how the Japanese side views it, I just wouldn't even factor it into like my analysis of the series. If you're like me the first time and you just have no idea, it will drag it down for you. But I think if you go in with the right mindset, this is a pretty sterling 11 episode run.
Yeah.
And then there's this weird other thing.
Yeah, there's this weird other thing. It's just whatever, you know. We never talked about the fucking like Chibi Gundam, SD Gundam stuff.
Yeah.
I've watched some of that. Some of it is okay. Most of it is like, here's this weird other thing that you don't really have to worry about because it's not that good.
Exactly. It's fine. It's fine.
But OVA-a-thon team as a whole, fucking rules.
Fucking rules. It's
oh my
great.
God. Yeah.
Like I said, it's the dessert for Gundam fans. It really is one of the things I would like. Even if you just have a passing enjoyment, you should watch this one. Anyone would enjoy it.
Yeah, like it is. It's maybe like the best concentrated mecha action of anything I've seen. I think I'd probably put it in that. Like there's other Gundam stuff that's very good. There are other mech shows I've seen that are very good. But if you want just that sense of like the military tactics, the action, the animation, and all that, and then have like the narrative and all that is good and supports it. If you want that full package there in like a concentrated 11 episode thing, this is like as good as that will get.
It's like the popcorn action movie of Gundam.
Yeah.
And it is the kind of thing that, and honestly, I would pay good money for them to just put all 11 in a theater together, and I would sit there for 4 hours watching it.
Yeah.
But like, that's what it feels like. It's like the John Wick of
yes.
Gundam or something. Like just top-notch popcorn entertainment that does not really have any aspersions about what it is beyond that, you know?
Which is fine.
Which is totally fine. Yeah. This is not like Stardust Memory thinks it is smarter than OVA-a-thon team, and it is much dumber.
Yeah.
OVA-a-thon team is not trying to tell you it is smarter or dumber than anything else. It just gets its boots on the ground and goes to work.
It's just like, check out this fucking goof with the fucking grappling hook and a giant Gatling gun on its shield. That's really cool, huh?
Yeah. And I think if you look around the fandom, this is probably one of the most least disagreed upon series.
Oh yeah, it is. This and like War in the Pocket are probably the most two universally beloved. Like Zeta is really high up there, but yeah, like it's hard, you'd be very hard pressed to find someone who likes Gundam but does not like OVA-a-thon team. I've never seen it.
It would be fucking weird.
Yeah,
it would be
pretty hard to do.
Like I would be like, what are you watching Gundam for?
Yeah.
if not that goof, what are you watching Gundam for?
Yes.
I mean, I know it has a lot of other interesting things.
It has a lot of other things, but also like there are other stuff that do those other things too. But Gundam's the only thing that has all that shit together in one package with a goof.
Yep. Let's talk about music for a second.
Yes, because you've got both a great opening and ending themes, and then you also have a phenomenal, stellar soundtrack by Kohei Tanaka.
Yes. Kohei Tanaka, who I think his work on G Gundam is even better, but this is obviously no slouch.
Yeah.
It's very good. Kohei Tanaka should just score more things. He's awesome. And I think, honestly, one of the reasons to watch Miller's Report, if you haven't, is that the score is different than in those episodes, and it's really good music.
Mm-hmm.
But it's great. There's a concert album out there that was live in Prague with like the Prague Philharmonic that's very good to go listen to if you want the symphonic version. It's a killer score.
Yeah, it's absolutely killer. It's also funny for me because I played a lot of that Gundam Versus game on the PlayStation 4, and that game has a huge selection of music from different Gundam shows that you can then select and like say, this is music plays over the victory screen and all this kind of stuff. You can customize it, which is awesome. And the song I made is like the main menu song, which I've heard now like dozens of times. Like, 'cause every time I boot up that game, when I get like a hankering to be played as the Goof, which I did yesterday, it's like I just want to play like 10 minutes of this game and jump around in this mobile suit. The song I have is the song that plays over the like next on previews, the ba ba da ba ba da ba 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 ba, and so because it's such a great song, and it also is a very good menu song because it is designed to be this like next on thing. So it's designed to kind of play in the background to get you excited. And so every time I'd have a next on preview, like my hands twitched a little bit, and that like I'm like, is my video game just booted up? What's happening? Because it's just that exact track.
Yep. The theme songs. I mean, Shine in the Storm and 10 Years After are one of the best pairs in the whole series. I love that they just stick with them and they didn't change halfway through because it was 4 years. They really could have.
Yes, yeah. At some point, they could have been like, we need to make a little bit extra money on from some CD sales or something, guys.
But no, it's great. I mean, Shine in the Storm is one of those I would put up there with like Dreams from Afterward Gundam X, or the Gundam Wing song where the first like 10 seconds is this hook that like means you will always watch the full opening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a phenomenal opening. I also adore 10 Years After.
Yes.
Especially combined with the animation. It's one of my favorite, like, not since the Relina ending in Gundam Wing has there been an ending animation that I enjoyed just watching the animation of Shiro just sitting back reading a thing while, like, dumb stuff is happening around him as people are, like, putting their like fucking Playboy in the camera and people like carrying boxes around and someone like is doing shit in the background. It's a very great. It captures so much of the tone of those moments in 08 The Mess Team where people are just like fucking around on the base before the mission happens.
Yeah. I also love the animation for the opening. It's got some sexy ass shots. I also love the one I always remember in the opening is after there's the shot where you have the Gundam walking through the water, which is great, and then it goes to Mikkel on this like giant fucking like turret that's just firing like cases and going everywhere, which Mikkel never does.
Yeah,
but I love that it's in the theme.
He fires that gun like once, and it's when he like fucks up and fires it, and then the Absolus knows where they are in episode 3 or 4. It's like, why did you shoot, you fucking idiot? It's the only time he shoots that gun.
But I love that he's kind of like going full Rambo in the opening. God, they're good. I think the song, the Elidor song that plays several times is great, and Miller's Report also has a unique ending theme. These are all by the same artist, I think.
Yeah, Chihiro Yonekuda.
Yeah, and those are all good. The Miller's Report one is also, if you've never heard it, it's not as good as the other ones, but it's worth listening to.
Gateway to Eternity is that one's a good one. Very good.
Anything else to say about the 8th motherfucking MS team?
8th MS team. It's just... I had such a great time watching this.
Yeah.
It's been a couple of years, and I got the Blu-rays, and the Blu-rays are very crisp, and they look very good.
Yeah.
It's such a treat. It's just such a pleasant show to watch.
I could go do it again right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It is one of those desert island Gundams that's like, I would take that Blu-ray with me on my desert island that has a TV and electricity and watch it.
I would at least need episode 10.
If you had to pick one... I mean, episode 10, that might be the most we've talked about any individual episode on this podcast outside of the original Gundams where we only did like 4 episodes.
It's that good.
It's very good. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Should we give a preview of what we're doing next time?
Yes, because there is a little bit to discuss with next time, because we are moving into the new century, the 21st century, the first proper 21st century Gundam show, which is Mobile Suit Gundam Seed. Which I'm really excited to watch that, really excited to get to do that podcast and move into like this transitionary period into what feels like modern anime now that we're going into the 2000s. Also,
by far one of our most requested episodes. I get comments on it all the time, which I do want to say, we're going to do all of them.
Yes.
It's okay. We're going to get them. If there's one you want to... Like, I know Iron Blooded Orphans is out there. It's going to be a while, but we will get there.
That's going to be a good one.
Yes,
but Kiko Inoue, the anime mom, she also is in Iron Blooded Orphans, but she does not play a mom in that one, but she's very good in that one.
Groundbreaking.
Yes. So we are going to get to all of them. We're going into Gundam Seed. If you know a little bit about Gundam Seed, you might know that there are 2 different versions of Gundam Seed that are out there. And so there is the original TV version, and then they made a HD remaster version of it several years later. We are going to specifically watch the original TV version of it as it aired way back when.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say, like... the special edition is the one that's on like Crunchyroll and stuff.
Yes, If you watch it on Crunchyroll, it will be the HD remaster.
Yeah. Why do you want us to do the original version?
Well, this was a choice that you made.
Was it?
You told me this like 6 months ago. As is always in keeping with this podcast, Jonathan, I try not to make the decisions of where we go. I just let you do it, and I make small suggestions.
Because I'd be fine with either one, because I haven't seen it and I have no preference.
So the last time we talked about it, which was when we thought that we would have probably been 3C Destiny at this point, instead of having like this huge hiatus we had between Stardust Memory. You said you expressed more interest in the theatrical version. I think that's what we're going to watch specifically because a lot of the direction that this project has gone in is chronological Gundam. And I do think there's something I want to kind of preserve for Double O Gundam when we get to that as being the first widescreen HD, full digital animation, all that stuff. And the HD remaster of Gundam Seed is a little bit redone in kind of that style. And there are some minor alterations that are made to, in a very Star Wars Special Edition kind of way, like a Han shoots first kind of thing, where there are like some moments where like the context is slightly changed because they slightly altered it. Nothing huge. So we are going to watch that version because I think I don't know what's the best version to watch. That's the one that I think is most in keeping with the spirit of what we're doing with the podcast.
Which is a little bit history as well.
Yes. All that being said, if you want to watch the HD remaster version, because it is a lot easier to access, you can just watch it on Crunchyroll. It is if you own the previous DVD release, that's a fairly old release at this point. That's the only version that was on there. There is now, I don't know if it's out yet or not, but Right Stuff has is either has or is in the process of releasing a big box set that is very expensive that has both of them on there, which will be the first time the original TV versions have been aired or like available in the West officially. But so if you want to watch the HD remaster version, you can watch that version because they're like 99% basically the same. All the characters, the narrative content, all that is going to be the same. You'll be able to follow all of our conversations. Outside of, we'll like obviously be talking a little bit about specifics of animation, and when there are moments where they made changes, Jonathan, if you want to like look up a list and watch them after you've watched Gundam Seed, you can do that. I will also shout them out and like kind of indicate here's like where they did this one thing in the HD remaster that's slightly different, and we can talk about those. Generally speaking, the HD remaster is a very good version. It is not like Dragon Ball Kai or something where they just like sort of cropped it to make it widescreen and stuff. They did a lot of work reanimating sequences. So it is a totally fine version of that show. There are some advantages to it, some disadvantages depending on how you feel about some of the changes. So I just want to make that so when people are looking, if you want to watch along with us, that's what we're going to do. And it is a similar situation with Seed Destiny, where they did an HD remaster. The HD remaster for Seed Destiny is also not that good compared to Seed, because the Seed HD remaster was a pretty lavish production that did not make that much money, because I don't know what context, I don't know how it would have made the money back, because they basically half remade that TV show, and that's a lot, that's expensive, and people are not going to make that money back that way. So they didn't spend as much money on it on Seed Destiny. We are going to do the TV version of Seed Destiny also, and that would be one where I'd maybe nudge people a little bit more to like seek out that version, because I think it's there are several things that are notably better in that version of it.
Yeah. But that'll be next. It might be a little while before we can get to it, because this is a 50-episode series.
Yes, this is a full, we're out of OVA land, and we're back into full, proper, big, crazy Gundam shows that, aired over the course of an entire year.
Yeah, so we're both going to watch it, me for the first time. I know nothing about Seed. I don't know the first thing. I haven't looked up a goddamn thing about it, other than I know it's really popular.
Yes, it is profoundly popular. I'm very excited to watch it again, because I remember liking Seed quite a bit. And I think it's going to spark interesting conversations. And I'm just excited to like move into this like era, like we're in this like fun transitionary period in the early 2000s that then starts to move to modern anime. So it's a big shift we're going to be jumping into now with Gundam Seed that I think is very exciting for the podcast.
Absolutely. So I think we've done a lot of great stuff already for this show, and I'm excited to get into kind of the second half of Gundam's lifespan.
Yes, yeah, it's very exciting. I'm so happy we're doing the podcast again. Hopefully, it's not going to be a year before we get to Seed. We'll try to not make it a huge, long wait, but we will be joining you again soon with jumping into some motherfucking Mobile Suit Gundam Seed.